Okay, it says we are live. Let's give it a little bit of time here to make sure it really truly is live. And let me throw this link over in the supporters of Leah Remini group so they can join.
Oh, there you are. Now you're big. Yay.
Oh, good.
Hi, Kitty.
Yeah, so on my end, the way it looks is when you're talking, I can see your whole face, and then when I'm talking, I see my whole face. Is that what it does for you too?
No.
Oh.
It stays on you, which is totally fine. I don't need to see my whole face. Kitty. Where did you get that poster, by the way, that everyone comments on all the time?
So the production company sent it to Mike, and he didn't have any room on his wall in his house to put anywhere, obviously a good place to put it up, and so he just gave it to me. And I have asked Mike to ask the production people if that is supposed to be Tom Cruise or David Miscavige. And they said it's supposed to be neither. And I'm like, then what the hell is the point of having an image of some dude on the poster? Like, to me, it looks like Tom Cruise acting like David Miscavige.
Yeah, it does. That's funny.
And that's what I say, but the production guys are like, no, that's not who it is. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
I guess that would be too many legal issues if they used.
I know.
Well, anyways, it's gotten a huge amount of mileage. Just so kudos on putting that right there.
Oh, the poster? All right. So my favorite part of doing these is futzing around with all the technical stuff. I just want to make sure I actually posted the link because I cannot quite tell.
Let's see.
All right. Yeah, looks like it's there. Looks like it's there. I'm going to put it over in the fans group as well, just while we're here doing this.
Kitty. Okay. I don't know.
All right, and just for good measure, I will tweet this as well while everyone sits here and waits.
Covering all your bases. Yeah, I don't know.
All right.
So did you put it in one of the old conversations, or is it just a separate post?
I made it a separate post, but I will go back and do that as well.
Oh, no, for whatever reason, it's not showing up. I'm not seeing it anyways as a new post.
If you refresh and if you go to the discussion tab, it should be near the top. In fact, let me pin it. I'm going to pin it to the top because I see it right here.
Jehovah's Witness thing, which I think is pinned.
All right, I'm going to pin this one. Well, so this is now where it gets silly. I'm not sure if the one that I'm pinning, I think that's the 5 minutes we just futzed around with on Facebook.
The only one I have is that original one where there was no invite to me. That's the only.
Okay, good. I'm going to delete this one then.
Okay. Yeah, delete. Oh no, there's another one. 21 minutes.
Good times. Okay, live Q&A on YouTube. Christi Gordon.
You try to send that. Oh, because he deleted it. I don't know what's funny.
All right, that is definitely there now. Let me know if you can see that.
Yes, I see that.
Awesome.
So just click on the link. Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, we've covered all bases, and now we can get rolling. Hi, Christi. How you doing?
Hi, Aaron. Bye.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this with me. You've printed off a list of questions. We announced in the supporters of Leah Remini Facebook group that we were going to be doing this. I think we might have done the same in the fans group. I can't recall. But for anyone who doesn't know, Christi was on Scientology in the Aftermath, Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath. I was just pulling up a list of the episodes right here. You were on season 2, and it was episode 8. Although, at least that's how I have them numbered. Is that how you know it as well?
I've heard it called 7, 8. I don't know. I guess it depends on whether it was Comcast listing it or A&E listing it. It comes up different. I don't know.
That's right. And some people count the specials as episodes and some people don't. So it was the episode with you, and then it also had Mimi Faust, and the name of the episode was The Greatest Good. And it talked about your time in Scientology and the Sea Org and growing up in the Sea Org, because you and your family joined when you were very young. Instead of rehashing that part of the story right now, let's get into the Q&A, and then in the process of that, we'll dig it all up.
Okay.
So what's the first one on your list?
I have, oh, hold on. That's not the first page. It doesn't matter what order I do these in, does it?
No, not really.
Okay, so this is Kirsten Benjamin Branham. Hi, Kirsten. It says, "It seems you are such a sweet and kind woman. How have you recovered from the abuse you suffered as a child? How long did it take? And how were you able to realize that what happened to you wasn't your fault? And do you have a good support system in place?" Thank you. I try to be sweet and kind. My mother would appreciate that. How have I recovered from the abuse? I just think it's a process. Frankly, I was out for a long time before I ever looked backwards. The only time I ever talked or thought about Scientology really as an adult was, recollecting something that happened with my family. Sometime we did this or sometime we did that. But for the most part, my childhood was just put away. I didn't put much thought into it because it didn't matter. I thought, it was something weird and bad that had happened to me, but it was behind me, and I just tried not to focus or think about it. So digging into what had happened didn't happen to me until probably 5 years ago. I started reading. I read Inside Scientology by Janet Reitman, and I read Blown for Good about the same time, and both of those books completely blew my mind. There were people in there that I knew. There were things that I had experienced and seen, and it was just shocking. It just totally rocked me. So that made me start thinking about my childhood. I had always thought I was just an odd person, or I just had quirky personality. I was kind of antisocial, and I just thought all these things were my personality traits. I didn't really attribute them to my childhood too much because I didn't look at that stuff. I was just trying to get by and survive and have a job and make friends and not have the stigma of what I experienced follow me. So you know, as far as recovery, it's just a total work in progress. I can't say that I have recovered. It's the more I examine, the more I can connect emotions with what we went through, the more I connect to other kids that experience the same thing or worse, the more I recognize and can put a name to that experience, where I never tried to do that before. I was just coping. My whole life I was just coping and not looking back. So now I'm actually looking, analyzing, trying to separate these things and understand it better. And so that's kind of where I am with it, really.
So, Christi, how old were you when you were pretty much done with Scientology? When was like your last involvement with the official Church of Scientology?
So in 1988, 87, 88, I was working at the IMU IAS office in Los Angeles for a guy named Ken Pirak, and there was a guy that was a FSM that did big cycles named Greg Hughes. And over time, spending time with Greg Hughes, he convinced me to reactivate my contract. And I was 19, I think, at that point. And so I did, and I went into the EPF for one day at PAC base, maybe 2 days, and an FSO recruiter found me on course during my EPF and physically dragged me out of the course room and got in this giant fight, locked me in his office, and got in this big fight over ownership of me because I used to belong to the FSO. To shorten it up, my boss, Ken Pirak, pulled me back to post at the IAS because you can do that for a year to protect me from this argument. But I got pulled back into the COCMO CW, who is now acting COCMO PAC, Cheryl DeChef. And she sent me to Flag for lower conditions and OW write-ups. So they flew me there, and I spent the next 3 or 4 days just doing OW write-ups and kind of being shamed and annoyed. And I walked out of there and decided I would never go back. So that was 19 or 20 at that point.
Okay, so you're about 20-ish years old back then, and that was about 30 years ago.
Yeah, it was 1988, 87, 88.
Okay. And so then when you, okay. So how did that experience, like, so you got from whenever you got into Scientology, were you born into it, or were you just very young when your mom got into it?
2 years old.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So you've basically been living the Scientology experience your entire life. Had you gone to school or no? Because you grew up in the Cadet Org and the Sea Org.
No, I went to school until 10 when we went into the Cadet Org. Okay. So up till 10, we went to elementary school, kindergarten, all those things. The Cadet Org and PAC interrupted school, but then because she was kicked out for disquals, we left with her because we were so young. So then we went back to school. So my school was interrupted again at 12 when we moved to Flag and went back into the Cadet Org, because we did not go to school really. Cadets didn't go to school.
Right. So then you went to like, so you basically went to like a public school until like the 5th grade?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, so you at least had some concept of the real world and real people. Did you have this idea that there was something significantly different in the way you were growing up or what your family was doing and everyone else, or was it kind of oblivious to that?
Oh, no, I knew that. Yeah. No, I knew that from probably 6, 7 when we were left home alone a lot in San Francisco, and my mom was at the org, and we'd meet neighboring kids and have conversations with them, and the words we used, they recognize, and their parents were home, our parents weren't home, their parents helped them with homework. My mother didn't help me with homework. We cooked and cleaned and got ourselves to school. Other kids didn't do that. So I became really aware really young that we were quite different.
Got it. So you're aware of this difference, but at least you are also being exposed to the real world, which is a positive, I think. I think some of those kids just never even were. So then when you like left at the age of 20, did you experience some like ice cold water dip having to now be in the real world, or it wasn't that shocking because you'd already kind of been living in it earlier?
So even when so after I left the RPF the second time, by then I was 16, 17, I ended up going to live with an aunt and uncle briefly for about 6 months that were not Scientologists. And I was in really bad shape, but I worked for them. And unfortunately, the pressure that they kind of put on me was, okay, what are you going to do with your life? You're going to go to college? You're going to, get an education? What career do you want? And I was so screwed up at that point, and I would assume probably with the PTSD kind of related whatever from the year on the RPF. But so I had some time in the real world away from Scientology here and there. We moved to Alaska and spent 1.5 years there, and I had a WOG job there, and I lived with a WOG. So I dabbled in that life, but I watched what Scientology told us was out there. I watched it happen. There was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of domestic violence. There were people struggling and suffering. And so unfortunately, my time in that world didn't actually teach me that Scientology was wrong. It actually kind of reinforced what they were warning me about. But when I did finally leave at 20, it was kind of like, I don't want to say a bad word, but screw it. I'm going to try this. I'm going to let go of my safety net. I'm going to not fall back on or orbit Scientology. I'm not going to work for a Scientologist. If my mother disconnects from me, then that's what she does. And I'm just going to see, because other people can do this. Why can't I do it? Other people exist and survive. And so it was kind of like a gamble where I just threw all caution to the wind and said, screw it, I'm just going to try this. And yeah, so there was definitely a real kind of harsh acclimation. All of a sudden I had to totally support myself. I didn't have, all my friends were gone. All my resources were missing now. Just that comfort zone of being in the bubble of Scientology with the local Scientologists. Suddenly that was gone for me by choice, but it was scary. But I've been working literally working a full-time job since 13 or something. So that part wasn't unusual. And frankly, the work was easier outside of, Scientology and the Sea Org, breaks and vacations and benefits and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the language was really difficult for me to realize that I had to alter the way I spoke to people. That was hard. And for me, probably the biggest problem was trying not to let people know that I was an alien, trying to pretend to fit in and not say anything that would draw attention to myself as a crazy, uneducated, degraded reject, which is what I thought I was from what I was told. So I just tried to not say very much and stay under the radar. And that was the hardest part for me, was just blending in with society,
Interesting. By the way, I've just adjusted our audio levels a little bit to make me a little quieter. So if you're watching this, guys, let me know if you think it's any better. So, Christi, let me ask you this. There's varying schools of thought on whether time spent in a cult, and I think almost all former Scientologists agree that Scientology is a cult. The vast majority agree. I think all non-Scientologists agree Scientology is a cult. But there are varying degrees of varying schools of thought on whether time spent in a cult is something that a person has to recover from when they leave, or if it's just this weird, strange, unique experience that can kind of make people, I want to say stronger, but that makes it sound like I'm painting it in a positive light. I mean, you go through hell and you come out stronger. How do you feel about it? And like, do you feel that the experience was something you've had to recover from and get back to good? Or are there any parts where it kind of like was more challenging than anything you'd experience in normal life, that in some ways it sets you up to maybe deal with that better? How did that work for you?
I think it's both. Honestly, I can see both sides perfectly clearly. I feel like, especially the second time on the RPF for the year that I was there, I learned that I could pretty much survive anything. And I was always raised to think I was a giant phaeton and very powerful, and there was nothing I couldn't do. And so, you know, you have that inflated sense of whatever. I think now, and after I left, I think I used that momentum that I had learned in Scientology, the make it go right, you know, increase your stats from last week, you know, no excuses. I rode on that for a long time, and that was fine. I mean, I had no problem getting jobs once I faked a resume, because I had a certain amount of ethics presence. I had a very good communication style. People told me all the time that I presented really well. Those things did help me. But the emotional, psychological aspect of it, honestly, I had real social anxiety issues. And I don't, you know, that's, I think, just from not developing as a child, you know. I was very disconnected with my emotions. I was uncomfortable with emotions. They didn't exist to me. I didn't have compassion or empathy. I thought everyone should just get with the program and get it done and move on. I had that Sea Org mentality. I didn't trust people because I couldn't trust people as a kid. I had very much a couple different personalities. I had the one that was really me and the one that I projected to people. And I feel like I really spent most of my time trying to project the thing that people needed so that they would like and respect me and want me, you know, if in their company or as their friend or whatever. So it was quite false. I knew that, but it was my coping mechanism. It was what I knew how to do, you know, just kind of blend in, basically. So the work for me didn't start until later. That I actually got a lot of mileage using those Scientology processes or Sea Org kind of guidelines. But I wasn't happy. I was drinking a lot, you know, just coping a lot, and having to peel that stuff back off, which is I've really just started doing in the last few years, figuring out why I don't bond with people, why I don't care if my relationships end, why I don't trust people, why I have this persona and valence all the time that's not really authentic. Those are the things I've had to work on. And I know that those are from that same thing. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Yes, I can power through stuff and make things go right. So those skills do come along with that experience. And I, like, you know, what you said, I feel like I experienced something that was very strange, but I chose to take the things away with me that worked and made me stronger and that I could count on. And yet a lot of them were bad, and I have to kind of peel them away and figure out what's me and what's not me, you know?
Right. Great answer. You know, there's no question that in the normal, you know, the real world outside of Scientology, you at least, depending on your experience, have an opportunity or are possibly encouraged to self-reflect, examine, like the things you mentioned, examine your emotions. Why do I act this way? Why do I feel this way? Why do I think this way? And in the real world, maybe a lot of people don't do that, but at least there's a chance, and there are people who do encourage others to examine things like that. And in Scientology, you're almost told the answers to those questions. Mm-hmm. You don't have the freedom to examine that for yourself and come to your own conclusions.
Right, exactly.
You're told it's your reactive mind. And then the answers even get more detailed than that. You know, if it's either your tone level or it's your engrams or it's your evil purposes, you're not. And it's one of the reasons why all Scientologists end up being kind of the same. They think the same, they talk the same, they act the same, and there's not a lot of individuality encouraged, you know. So like everything that you've said, any former Scientologist is, or if they spend time on staff and in the Sea Org, is going to be able to identify with that. And I think that's a really important point to be able to take the time out and take the freedom to try to understand yourself better. And Christi, the ironic part is that Scientologists think that they understand themselves better than fucking anyone.
That's crazy.
You know, they think the process of auditing is them self-examining whatever, without recognizing and being aware that they're being fed all of the conclusions they're supposed to come to.
Exactly. Not right.
All right, what's the next question? And again, any order that you want. Maybe we won't even cover all of them. We can spend as much time on each question as we want.
Just the second part of that was, how long did it take you to realize what happened to you wasn't your fault? And I would say until I started going back and dissecting this stuff, it never even crossed my mind to consider fault of anything. It was just a unfortunate circumstance to me. Now I realize I didn't realize I had rights as a child. I had no idea. I had no idea that a lot of the things that happened to us were illegal. How would I know that? From 2 on, I was taught this is how things are. This is what you do. This is what is expected of you. So I've just, examining all that stuff and kind of coming to terms with that. And so many awful words and awful descriptions now I can assign to my experience that I never tried to put words to before. So anyways, it's a process, but I'm just kind of at that point right now. And my support is my sister, who's been with me through everything, my partner, Bill, who just supports me in everything I do, and then other second-generation kids and ex-Scientologists that understand what I went through. That's really my support system. Okay.
That's awesome. Christi, what unique parts of Scientology do you feel are most damaging? And I don't mean like the RPF, because that's super, super unique to the Sea Org. And I think in some ways is probably one of the worst things that someone could experience in Scientology, depending, which you experienced many times. But what about what are the concepts or the practices in Scientology that you find most harmful?
I haven't ever thought about that before, but the first 2 that pop up to me are for kids and for their parents. The breaking down of the parent-child relationship. So children aren't really children. They're, eternal beings in small bodies. That destroys childhood, number 1. Just threw that away because I don't get to have a childhood because I'm expected to just be an adult and be an operating Phaeton and just recall my abilities from my past life. And the idea that it gives to our parents that that our relationship isn't special. It's just this lifetime that you're my mom or my dad, last lifetime you're somebody else's, next lifetime you'll be whatever. It gives permission to not be a family, really. And allows all those things that will come after that, the focus on Scientology, the separating of the kids, the neglect of the kids. It gives that all complete permission, when you recognize children as adults. I mean, I think that's hugely damaging to children and families. And the second thing is the elimination of emotions, that emotions are misemotions unless they're positive, basically. So you don't get to grieve. You don't, and I'm thinking of this as a child, but it would apply to adults as well. If you have fear, oh, well, that's a misemotion. That's below this on the tone scale. If you're, unless it's positive, you don't get to recognize it and respect it. If it's not, anger, I guess, is high. And so I use that a lot because that one was acceptable. But all the other ones, that you don't get to feel your feelings, I think that's so destructive to humans, because it gives license to all this mistreatment, breaks up families, tears you apart from the inside, really, because you're disconnecting yourself from yourself. Those would probably be my top two. I'm sure if I had put some thought into it, I could come up with some others, but those are really damaging, I think, to humans and children, you know?
Totally. Totally. Okay, cool. All right, I've actually got the list of questions in front of me too.
Okay.
Let's see. So Audra Hedger says, how is your mom doing? Has Scientology's anti-psychiatry stance soured your view of that care that she needs? Yeah, what's up with that?
My mom is safe. She has some clear moments. Mostly her illness has taken over. In the beginning, she had more clear moments, but over time, it's just degenerated to the point where she's pretty much overcome by severe bipolar disorder and paranoid schizophrenia, basically. We had a really hard time deciding to get her care, not because we didn't want to get her care, but because even though we were all basically out when we discovered her situation, none of us had said, I am not a Scientologist. I will never think this way again or do this thing again. We just kind of were non-practicing. So when we found her in this complete psychosis, jumping out of cars, taking her clothes off, trying to drown herself, we were terrified and knew we had to figure something out. But we knew that we tried everything Scientology related. We tried locationals, we tried sleep, food, destimulation. We tried, locationals. We tried every assist we could think of. So our arsenal was used up very quickly. And what was left was hospital. What do we do? She's going to kill herself. We're going to lose her if we don't do something. And so we knew we had to act. And the part that was so hard was we knew once we got her psych care, she would be completely disqualified for further auditing. And making that decision for another human is really hard. So that was the hard part. But once we realized it wasn't an option, this is a life-saving situation, we had to have her Baker acted, and she was taken to Pinellas Emergency, and which was nearby, and they, gave her an injection that helped her get kind of have a mental vacation. And we knew that was the right thing to do, but we had a really hard time then after that, because she, of course, was extremely angry, as any 20-year Scientologist would be, that you just put in a mental ward and gave psychotropic drugs to. So, but I would do it again in a heartbeat, and I don't have any problem with that, the fact that we had to choose that for her. It's a hard thing to choose for someone else. It would be okay to choose that for yourself, but to make that decision for someone that was so loyal and invested was really difficult. But since that time, 2 other members of my family that were in have been diagnosed with mental illness. And so we're actually a really good example of getting good care is life-saving. So I don't have any stigma related to psychiatric care at all anymore. Those people are compassionate. And although sometimes it's trial and error, they want to help you, as is my experience.
Right. Interesting. So when you guys made that decision to first get your mom admitted, you were still kind of mentally in Scientology.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So as much as making that decision for her, made sure she was never going to get any auditing, did making that decision also kind of push you guys over a line yourselves? Were you like, okay, once we make this decision, there's no going back for us as well?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I thought that at the time, although I thought What if this is the wrong choice? What if they give her a lobotomy? What if she doesn't get better? What if I get declared a suppressive? I mean, I had all these concerns because of a lifetime of thinking that the only solution was Scientology. So I think that making that decision for her actually probably was like the final straw for all of us. My aunt and uncle and grandmother were already declared earlier, but my sister and I were not. And so making this choice did kind of, it was the final axe, I would say, in Scientology for all of us.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how did your experience with your mom and her treatment and whatever facility that she was put into and your involvement in all of that, how did that experience, the real world experience, differ from what you expected it to be based on everything you'd been told in Scientology?
I don't know what my expectation was. I never thought about psychiatry. It never even was on my radar apart from they're all bad, don't do it. I never thought about what that would feel like if I had to go sit in a doctor's office and answer strange questions and take medication or whatever. It was terrifying, regardless of what Scientology told me. Sitting in a place where your mother is not herself and she's trying to harm herself, and you're surrounded by people that are trying to harm themselves, and they're being given injections and people are in straitjackets. I mean, that's crazy. It's scary, but it's life-saving measures, really. So I can't say that I had any expectation of how that would be, really, truly. It was scary, and then it got better because you realized that they were helping people. They weren't trying to control people. They weren't trying to put people on drugs just to put them on drugs. They weren't going to give them a lobotomy. They weren't going to give them shock treatment, which is what we were taught. Remember that video?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Scientology concept of what happens.
That was my expectation. I thought she shock treatment, and I was just like, oh my god, they're gonna.
I mean, some people do get it, and I gotta tell you, I'm amazed it ever happens still. But go ahead, keep going.
It's an option when medication doesn't work. They do.
I know, and again, I have to check myself sometimes because I go, okay, are my thoughts and opinions on this just from what I have been told in Scientology, or are there legitimate thoughts and opinions to be had on this that just so happen to coincide with what we were taught in Scientology? It's hard for me to understand how anybody can just go, well, nothing else has worked, so let's strap some electrodes to their head and zap some voltage through there, and that'll probably do something. I'm just saying, it's always hard, because I've done a lot of research in the medical field through my work in doing investment research. And I'm familiar with medical studies. I know how these things work. I'm familiar with trials. And it's just so hard to wrap my mind around that concept of doing a study based on zapping someone's brain with electricity. But that's fine. I don't want to get off the track either. Because I do understand that there are some people where, like you said, nothing else has worked.
So this guy is now, he's taken the medication, he's gone to the group therapies, he's tried everything that's supposed to work, and he's still suicidal. So we're going to try this next. And it's going to be a reset, like a computer reset of your brain. And it's a really low voltage. And I'm not trying to advocate for it. I'm just saying I went through this. I experienced this. Our family had to go through this process. It's a life-saving measure. Do we try this, or do we let them jump off the bridge? Which is it? And it did work. But I remember it feeling exactly what you're saying. Oh my God, they're going to hook the car jumpers up to the person, and they're going to put the thing in the mouth, and the foam is going to come out, and the eyes are going to roll back in the head. And that's not what happened. It's not like that, frankly. But yeah, it's still scary.
So your mom did have to do it?
No.
Okay.
Not my mom.
Okay. And so, okay, so the question was, how did the reality differ from the expectation? You said there wasn't really particularly an expectation.
Other than that memory that I have of Dennis Ehrlich being this crazy psychiatrist. Do you remember that video?
Was it Man the Unfathomable?
I don't remember the name of it, but it was disgusting. My uncle was in it. Dennis Ehrlich was in it. He was this crazy, disgusting psychiatrist that was like having sex with his patient and shock treating her as well. That they made us watch. It was disgusting. It was awful. So that's what I thought of psychiatrists. That's what I thought would happen when you went to the hospital. If I'm being honest, that is not what
Right.
happened.
Okay. And so does your mom, does she still have to live in managed care? Is she in a facility, or is she living in her own home, or what's going on?
No, she's totally institutionalized.
Hmm. Got it. Okay. And
let me add to that.
Yeah.
I've spoken to a few people. I read Nancy Maney's book, and she had some similar symptoms. I feel like I know, or I've been told, if we had gotten her the right care sooner, they would have been able to work with her condition. We did not know that. We just went off into bipolar disorder, drug management. We didn't try and treat the trauma. We didn't realize that something actually could have been done had we specifically treated her for what she experienced. They didn't, you know, the mental health field doesn't go, okay, let's see. You've spent 20 years in a cult. We're going to handle it like this, like they do now. Now, actually, she would have gotten trauma therapy. But at that time, they didn't know that. 30 years ago, they didn't know to treat her specifically for what she had experienced. So, but there are treatments available if you catch them early enough. So it doesn't have to end the way that it did for my mom.
Got it. Had your mom done the OT levels in Scientology, or any of them?
OT7.
What? Really?
Mm-hmm.
Had she displayed any signs of mental illness earlier on, before getting on the OT levels, early on the OT levels?
So she had postpartum, which was how she got into Scientology when my aunt came home from the Apollo to help her, with some psychosis. So she was seeing things and hearing voices. And at that time, they didn't seem to care. That didn't seem to be something that would disqualify her from doing auditing. So she had 72 Dianetics folders. And then, yeah, made it all the way to OT7 over the years without any kind of issues. The thing that kept popping back up was when she joined the Sea Org, she had this LSD disqual. And I think she had some amount of psychosis, but the structure of Scientology kind of kept her supported. She didn't have to think through it. She didn't have to have her own thoughts. She could just use LRH's thoughts. You know what I mean? She would just go back to the policy. What does LRH say? What does the book say? What does whatever say? And somehow she hobbled through all those years that way. And then
that's incredible.
And because she had disconnected from me for about a year. I don't know what was that final trigger where she just fell apart. I don't know. I know that she was upset about my time on the RPF. She really fought that. And she got in trouble. I know that she was seeing outnesses in management. Things were changing in 1988 and 89. And she would just write up 30-page knowledge reports on things. She just thought she followed everything to the letter. If LRH said that's how it's supposed to be. And, in the late 80s, there were things changing and it wasn't LRH anymore. So she was getting herself in the hot seat reporting stuff and being a squeaky wheel. And I think she got some really tough ethics handling and felt betrayed. And it just was too much for her. And then, but by that point, she'd run out of money. She didn't have money to pay for more anyway. And so I think that luckily, honestly, I think back to Lisa McPherson or something. If my mother had been connected to someone important, or if she'd had money, she probably would have been put through the same paces. It's probably very fortunate that she ended up on the streets, so we could help her and save her from that, ending. But because I wasn't in calm with her at that point, I don't know the blow by blows. I know when we found her apartment, she had phone book stacks of OW write-ups and knowledge reports on herself, on management. It was awful. She was clearly having a really hard time and trying to use policy to manage it, and she couldn't. So
amazing. What is your mom's name?
Judith Gordon.
Judith Gordon. There's probably some people watching who might have known her back from the days in Flag.
Married a lot of times. So she was Judith K. Steiner. She was Judith K. Wirtz. She was Judith Gordon, Judith Cuccinata. Unfortunately, none of the marriages came out. It's amazing to me how many Scientologists just work through marriages and 2Ds for somebody, for you know, a group that's supposed to be handling all your problems on all your dynamics. She's married 4 or 5 times and engaged in other people. So it's crazy.
You know, it's so ironic. You mentioned that. It's so ironic that the kind of contradiction between Scientology saying on the one hand, we have the solutions to all of your problems, but then on the other hand, the way they think about life and the dynamics, and you know, us being immortal thetans, makes marriages not particularly important. So it's more like, it's kind of like they're saying, if marriages are important to you, we can help you have a happy marriage. We don't think marriages are important, so we don't care about that. But if you do.
No, I mean, maybe in the beginning, but yeah, your second dynamic's not really important. Your first dynamic, actually, eventually you'll realize is not really important. Your third dynamic is really important. You know, fifth, obviously not. I mean, there's so many that you can just write off ultimately in the end.
I remember there was this one film, you know, even Scientology's films have trailers. Okay, so there was this one film, and it was a close-up on like a man and a woman from behind, and they're like, you know, side by side, and they're like, you know, snuggling, I guess. And it's supposed to look lovey-dovey. And you know, in Scientology, for the viewers, the first dynamic is yourself, and the second dynamic is like relationships and family. It goes, if you live only on the first and second dynamic. And then it zooms out, and I forget what it shows, but it played some really like treacherous music. That's all you'll ever have. No, 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 no.
Oh, that's awful. Because that's true, right? As soon as you get into a Sea Org recruiting cycle, you'll realize first dynamic's nothing, second dynamic's not. None of the things are, I mean, they're all nothing, right?
Right. All right, let's see. Chuck Beatty is asking, was your mom on, was she on staff? What org or mission? Yeah, was your mom on staff?
So she was on staff at San Francisco Org. She was the letter reg. She was very good at it. She wrote amazing, beautiful letters to anyone that had ever come in, and shared her wonderful experience. And she loved that job. And then she was in and out of the Sea Org, I think 4 total other times, and never had an actual post though, because she would get onto the EPF and then struggle, and then maybe she was on the FRU for a while, but she never actually made it to anything else. But
oh, so she never finished the EPF?
No.
Oh, so depending on how people use the word, you have to finish the EPF to be in the Sea Org. So she never actually landed on a post in the Sea Org.
She was on the FRU, so I don't know if that's after the EPF or.
It actually is. You finish the EPF, okay, and then the FRU is the Flag Readiness Unit. That's usually if you're at Flag and you're getting ready to go to the ship, or if you're somewhere else getting ready to go to Flag. What was she? Was she at Flag getting ready to go to the ship, or somewhere else getting ready to go to Flag?
She was at Flag.
Okay.
I getting ready to go to the ship. I don't know about that. I mean,
it might be when you finish the EPF at Flag, and then someone realizes, shit, you're not qualified to be at Flag, but instead of shipping you off to another org, they put you in a little unit until you're qualified.
That's the one.
Yeah. All right, so let's see. Let's look at some of these next questions here. All right, Tori Christman asks, if you could tell someone in Scientology one thing, what would it be?
You know, I think, I'm sure there's a lot of things that I'm not thinking of that you could say that, you know, people point at statistics and blah, blah. I would just say, you know, that thing you're feeling, that doubt, that thing, that these things don't add up and they don't make sense, that's real, and you should trust it. If we hadn't suppressed all those doubts we had along the way, all those things that we rationalized and justified and glossed over and looked the other way from, we would have seen all this shit so much sooner. So I would just say to someone inside, your instincts and that radar that you have inside, it's there for a reason, you know. Trust that. Try that. Don't give an organization, your family, your life, your children, even though you're seeing bad things happen to people, don't do it. Protect yourself, defend yourself, ask questions, disagree, you know, be a human, be an actual Phaeton, for fuck's sake. You know, don't just be a sheep. I don't know, that's stupid, but that's what I would say. Use that feeling you're having inside. It's legit, you know.
Yeah.
It's not your reactive mind. It's not in theta. It's not past life engrams. It's not evil purposes. It's not all these things that they try and explain it away as false purposes, whatever.
Right. I have to agree with what you said earlier about one of the most destructive parts of, if you want to say the Scientology belief system or the practices of Scientology, is the degree to which it destroys one's value of the family unit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that to me really is the thing. It's like, I could really give a shit about what people believe. It's when that translates into destructive actions, and the fact that people get so wrapped up into the beliefs of Scientology that they will discard their family. There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with the fact that the body of knowledge even asks that of you. Right? I haven't met many Christians that are like, yeah, my priest suggested I never speak to my family again, or, you know, they don't really see me with the program, so I don't really talk to them anymore. Now, that being said, there are a lot of people who, you know, don't talk to family members for various reasons. And if you've got personal reasons, those are your personal reasons. But if those personal reasons are the fucking lies that you're being fed by some high control group, holy shit. That's my biggest, you know, people, because sometimes people ask me that, like, you know, what's the beef? And I don't really give a shit that Scientology believes things that I no longer believe. I give a shit about the fact that people who believe in Scientology end up throwing their families away for it. That's kind of my beef.
Right. Yeah.
So let's see. Andrea Garner asks, after you left Scientology, did you have to make a concerted effort to unlearn the snitching culture that members are indoctrinated in? How long did it take you to realize that this is not normal behavior in the wider world? Snitches get stitches.
I didn't ever fall for that. So I think as a second gen and maybe a kid that didn't buy into everything that I was being taught, the things that didn't feel good to me, I rejected. I couldn't reject them publicly, but I rejected them internally. So I was never a snitcher. As a matter of fact, I became a really good liar. So, you know, all this coping as kind of neglected, abandoned kids, you learn to fend for yourself. And lying was one of those things, stealing. But I was not a snitcher. I wouldn't rat on anybody. Although when we were in the Sea Org, of course, we were required to write chits or things that shouldn't be, or knowledge reports. Because if you didn't and someone else did and it was found out that you knew, then you were sent to ethics. So there was a certain amount of that I did participate in while I was in, but never while I was out. Never as a non-Sea Org member would I write people up for anything. So that was not something that I was saddled with, let's just say.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I can think of examples of even the higher level people that I'm thinking about right now. who would never shy away from writing a report. I can still think of examples where they were like, yeah, except for that. You know, not writing reports on your friends, not, I mean, you know, it's just kind of this tribal thing where it's okay to write reports on these guys, but we're all good. We're good, right? We're tight. We're not going to report each other, right?
Exactly. Now, the flip side of that, though, my mother was devout. So devout. If she found a dime on the floor, we had to walk around and ask everyone if they dropped a dime. I mean, it was exhausting. She was so honest to a fault. So Scientology was, you know, she just wrote knowledge reports on me. She wrote knowledge reports on herself. She sent herself to ethics all the time. Of course, she sent us to ethics. I think we were 6 and 7 when she stopped disciplining us, and she just started sending us to the org, to the MAA, to be handled. So from then on, it was the MAA and not her. But she was so committed and loyal. There's those people that do, you know, take it to heart, and it's awful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Andrea asks another question. Andrea Garner, can you remember a time when you were happy in the Cadet Org, or was it a nightmare from beginning to end?
I have lots of fond memories in the Cadet Org, and I think it was the bonding with the kids, really. It didn't, when we were not in the Sea Org, when we were home alone, when my mom was on staff at the org, we had a hard time relating to other kids because we didn't speak the same language and we didn't have the same expectations. So our outlook was different. We tried to blend in as much as we could, but we didn't really fit in. So when we were recruited to join the Sea Org when we were 9 and 10 and signed our contracts, one of the selling points was you're going to be with kids like you. You won't have to pretend anymore. You'll be able to speak the way you do. Everyone will know what you're talking about. You won't have to blend in there. So there was a lot of bonding in the Sea Org, in PAC, and then again at Flag. So, you know, kids are going to find a way to have moments where they're just kids. So when we were walking from building to building, or when we were on the bus to the QI, or if somebody wasn't looking, we were totally joking and degrading and horsing around and just being kids, you know. After lights out, when we were supposed to be secured, we were in our bunks, we were giggling and whispering and stuff. So there's fond moments along the way. It, you know, wasn't, I mean, the rest of the time was not good. I'm not going to say it was torture constantly being a cadet. There were parts that were fun. I liked the idea of a uniform. I thought it was pretty cool to get promoted and to have my stats up. And, you know, it wasn't god awful all the time, but it wasn't normal. It wasn't a normal childhood for sure.
Yeah.
But there were fun.
I think probably the best thing Scientology has going for it is the people, the camaraderie. I think that's what keeps people in more than, probably maybe even more than, you know, the belief in full operating thetan. Who knows? But, you know, the one thing about Scientology is that for the most part, the people are very good people. For the most part, the people are there because they believe they're helping themselves and others. Whether they are or are not is a different discussion. Right. But most of them are sincere in their desire to be there for the right reasons.
So they're trying to improve themselves or others. That's a pretty good qualification system, honestly. That's not necessarily what happens, but that might be that's what drew my mother in. That's what they used to coerce us every time we'd sign contracts was, do you want to help mankind? Do you want to save mankind? Do you want to do the right thing? And of course we did, you know.
Right. What do you think keeps people in more than anything? Do you, because the public at large, I think, assumes that most people stay out of fear. And I don't think that's giving the entire thing enough credit. I don't mean giving Scientology enough credit. I don't think it's giving the people in Scientology enough credit that they're actually, that they're not just staying out of fear. Although there's always that component of fear of loss. What would I lose if I did this? What would I lose if I did that? But what do you feel sticks people in?
So mine was fear of loss. Mine was not fear of, mine was fear, honestly. A fear of, where do I go if I don't have this? I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be a prostitute. I'm going to be a drug addict. All the things that they told us we would be if we left Scientology.
Right.
But my mom, it wasn't fear. it was dedication, it was purpose, it was love of mankind. And she honestly believed that this was the only way to salvage mankind. And she was so dedicated and committed. So that it wasn't fear for her. She wasn't afraid of going to hell or, you know, things that other people are afraid of. It wasn't that. It was love and purpose, and her complete love of L. Ron Hubbard. She just wanted to do anything to help L. Ron Hubbard. She just totally bought everything he was selling.
Right. You know, I'm glad you mentioned that because, you know, people who spend a lot of time in Scientology understand how, well, I don't know about you. People like you and I, we never met L. Ron Hubbard. So all we know is what we were told of L. Ron Hubbard, what we've come to believe of him while we were in. And in that respect, there was a lot of charisma. But a lot of the guys in the supporters group, I see these comments all the time. They're like, I must be missing something. I'm listening to these quotes from his lectures. I'm watching some of these videos. I don't see any charisma. And part of me, I'm like, when they say that, I go, yeah, I don't know what about it was charismatic, but I promise you there was. What did you think of L. Ron Hubbard when you were in Scientology as a younger person?
So, well, first, that makes me think of, I went to this reunion recently, and I can't diss it, but this guy got up and he read this poem that he wrote about their time at sea and L. Ron Hubbard and the stars and the sky and the beautiful sunsets and how they were going to recreate the universe and salvage mankind and stuff. And I can see how they would feel that way. I get it. Back then. I knew that L. Ron Hubbard had hijacked my life. So when I was 6 or 7, I wrote him a letter that told him to F off. And I was really angry because I knew he was the reason my mother stopped reading me bedtime stories. I knew that that's where she was spending all her time. I knew that these people she was writing these letters to had become more important than her children. And I was so pissed off about it. So I didn't have a good relationship with L. Ron Hubbard. Let's just put it that way. But but I didn't think through the fact that they would figure out I wrote the letter and get hauled into ethics. And
you got called into ethics?
Oh yeah. And my aunt was S01, so hysterically, if the letter had gotten there, it would have gotten to her, which is pretty funny.
So just for the people watching, S01 is the Sea Org #1 line. That basically says every letter written to L. Ron Hubbard will be received by L. Ron Hubbard. But really, there were people who were staffed with that job. So your aunt would have been the one to receive that letter?
And transcribe, you know, and respond for him and sign his name for him.
Because, you know, he did not respond to those letters. That's Mike Rinder has said that did not happen.
So when I ask her questions about it, she says up to a certain year he did, and to certain people he did. So celebrities, VIPs, upper management, he actually did correspond, or he participated in it. But for the most part, just everyday Joe, like my letter from a 6-year-old from San Francisco org, it would have been my aunt or somebody like that who would have said, oh, honey, I'm sorry you feel that way. Maybe you should write up your OWs, you know, whatever. But what happened instead was they intercepted it, because I guess they read them before they send them. And I got hauled into ethics, and they threatened to dead file me. And so I got a lecture on what dead filing was. And I'd never heard of that. I'd heard of suppressive people, but I'd never heard of dead filing. So my lesson was never say anything against L. Ron Hubbard, or you will lose everyone, you know, your mother, your grandmother, your aunt, your uncle, whatever, whoever's in Scientology, and you will never be able to come back. There's no A to E for dead filed people. That was like expelled.
So let me ask you, because I mean, at least these days, dead file simply means the org is never going to write to you or respond to your letters or your phone calls. But it's different than being declared, because it's not, you're not forbidden from coming into the org. They're just not going to respond to you. And what gets you dead filed is sending in a letter or making a phone call basically kind of attacking Scientology. Sort of. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but is that not how it was explained to you at that time? Was they're like, if you do this again, you're done. You're dead to us.
Yeah. You're dead to us is how it was explained to me. Now, maybe that was misexplained as an ethics
Intentionally, I'm sure.
trying to not do it again, but I never did do it again. I never ever said another harsh word about Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard ever again until a couple of years ago. So it stayed with me, that lesson. Anyway.
That is incredible. I have never heard someone tell a story like that before.
Yeah.
That is so funny. Did you write this letter in crayon?
No, I sat right there at his desk in the lobby of the San Francisco Org. You know how they have a beautiful pen and a beautiful picture?
Oh, was your aunt just the LRH communicator at the San Francisco Org, or was she up lines?
No, she was on the Apollo in S01.
Oh, okay. So to the best of your knowledge, that org was actually sent to where L. Ron Hubbard was at least supposed to be.
Yeah, so to the best of my knowledge, my letter went nowhere. Whoever the LRH comm was of the org read my letter and 3 days later called me into ethics. It didn't go anywhere. They read it.
I got it. You were saying your aunt would have been the one to receive it if it had ever left the org.
Yes.
I got it. I can see, Chris, I can see you sitting there in crayons drawing pictures of someone like stabbing LRH, being like, take this, motherfucker.
I just said, fuck you, I hate you. And I had learned that language at musters at the org. Thank you very much. So,
Oh, that's awesome. All right, let's see. I think, all right, another question from Andrea. It is essential to growing children. It is essential that growing children have a healthy, varied diet. Can you describe the average diet in the Cadet Org, and did you ever go hungry?
We were so used to going hungry before we joined the Cadet Org. So we were on food stamps my whole childhood after we joined Scientology, because all of my mom's do the bridge and her library. So we were really used to not eating much, and being creative with food. Even taught us to what we could pick that grew wild to eat. We were taught to steal food when we were 5 and 6, or maybe 6 and 7, by some other Scientology kids that were a little bit older. So we started shoplifting food at a really young age. So when we were sold on joining the Cadet Org and signing our Sea Org contracts, that's one of the things also. Food, plenty of food, and a place to live that's, rent-free, and your bridge, which I didn't care about. So food was more available in the Cadet Org than we had in our real lives. It wasn't good by any means. One of our jobs was to prepare food in the Cadet Org at PAC. We had a lot of spoiled food, so there was a lot of food poisoning. But typically it was some kind of meat, some kind of canned vegetable, some kind of starch, rice or beans. So it wasn't like we went without food or were malnourished, aside from the food poisoning. And then at Flag, actually, it was so much better at Flag because we ate in the regular dining rooms in the beginning. So we ate in the hibiscus room, specifically in the beginning, and we had good food. I think it was fine. We had hamburger night and, tacos and Mexican night, and we had a dessert and cookies. So it was fine as long as you got there on time. There wasn't an overflow of food. So if you came late, then you ran out of food. But as you know, before too long, they moved all kids and families with children to the Quality Inn, and then they fed them there. And that was worse for sure. And if you didn't get there on time, you didn't eat. And so we stole a lot of food from the galley, from the dining rooms, from the walk-in freezers and fridges and the restaurants. We would eat mustard and mayonnaise packs. We would eat little cubes of butter. We drank the little half and half creamer things that they had at these unattended honor bar coffee things. But we'd climb over the fences to the galleys and sneak into the fridges. And I mean, that was always a funny thing to do, but we got punished. There was a lot of lower conditions for stealing food. Theft. It was just theft. It didn't matter whether you were hungry or not. It was theft.
Right.
Oh.
It sounds like the kids in the Cadet Org and in the Sea Org probably had it worse in other continents like the UK and Denmark or Europe. I'd say Europe. People are going to be like, UK is not a Denmark's not a cont. Europe is a cont, but Denmark is the only Sea Org in that cont. And Australia. They probably had it worse there. Who was telling the story about like fighting over oranges and shit? Was that Valeska or Melissa Paris at Stonelands? At Stonelands in England?
No, maybe so, but that also happened in LA, but it wasn't the Cadet Org, it was the kids. They would bring snacks out to the children, and there were only so many, and they would just attack.
Where was that? Where were you talking about?
That was PAC.
But PAC what? The public?
No, it was not the cadets, it was the younger children. It was snack time at the young.
Just the kids of Scientologists?
No, it was Sea Org, but it was the Sea Org that were pre-cadet. So what was that called?
The Cadet Org.
No, not the Cadet Org. These were like the nursery school kids. These were young.
Oh, younger than the cadets.
Younger than the cadets.
Oh, okay.
What the hell was that called? It was after my time, or it was I never was involved in it.
So the nursery or the ATA or.
So basically, it was the younger kids that were pre-cadet, that their parents were in the Sea Org, and they were basically in Scientology daycare all day long with no spring water.
There you go. Kids of Sea Org members. They were they're L. Ron Hubbard would say they were called children because children is one step below a cadet, and then cadet is one step below the Sea Org. I get it. It's that they were floaters. They're kids who have nowhere else to go, but they're not allowed to be cadets, and so those are the kids who I honestly think had it the worst.
So they were too young to be pressured into signing Sea Org contracts, because the cadets basically were the kids that aged up and were given the ultimatum: you sign this contract or we drop you off on Hollywood Boulevard. Those are your options. So these were the kids that were younger than that. So they were younger than 9, let's say. And I think it might have been, that was either in Jenna's book or it was Astra Woodcroft. It was one of those girls that was telling the story about PAC. Now, maybe that also happened in the UK, and I'm sure it did. I think smaller orgs or smaller locations, they had less, resources. They had less food. So the kids there probably struggled even more.
Right.
Really.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Have you connected with ex-members who have defected recently?
I would say that I have connected with and have had long-term friends that are under the radar or on the fence, and they're considering defecting or leaving. They're doing the gymnastics of, am I gonna lose my family right now? I don't want to be here, agree with this, but I can't lose my children, my job, my parents, my whatever. So I've met a few that have left. Yes, I have, for sure.
Right. There's a spectrum here that I think people do struggle to understand. Even after all of the content I've put out talking about various things, people will come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm so glad you escaped." And I go, "That's not really what happened." or how long ago did you leave? That's a question I can't answer. Like, wait, no, that's not, you don't just leave. It's not like, today I'm leaving. Mike Rinder can answer that question. Mark Headley can answer that question. They literally, that's a unique thing that happened.
Right.
And I'm mentioning that because I'm in touch with people who are all over that spectrum. There's still, like, a lot of people are in Scientology because once you're in Scientology, you're in until you're officially out. Just because you start to no longer believe shit doesn't mean you're not in Scientology. You're in Scientology for all intents and purposes, usually until they write a suppressive person declare on you. Now, there's many people who've been out of Scientology for decades and were never declared. And those people are out of Scientology. And actually, it'd be really interesting to talk to some of those people and go, okay, for you, when do you think you left? Like, what do you consider your leaving moment to be? But oftentimes, no matter no matter how much you no longer believe in the bullshit, until someone hands you an SP declare and says, you're declared, bye-bye, it's hard to think of yourself as being out of Scientology. Right. And so I'm in touch with people who do consider themselves out of Scientology but haven't been declared yet. I'm in touch with people who are still in Scientology, no longer believe the bullshit, but are still connected and don't want to be declared. I mean, there's some people out there who are just trying to get declared and they can't. Like they're connected to too many important Scientologists and there's nobody will declare them.
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say for us, I think that getting my mom's psych care was the boop. Okay, you're done. We made that decision that severed us spiritually with the practices of Scientology. And so that was not by choice, but by necessity. And it was a good thing to do. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, let's see what else we have here. People know, this is from Julie Knight. People know of your experience as a child. Did you stay in Scientology as an adult? Okay, well, we've kind of covered that. Is there anything else you want to say on that?
No, so as a child, 18, I didn't leave until I was 20. So I orbited, after I left the RPF and was homeless, I orbited Scientology because I was afraid to leave and I didn't have any skills or education or whatever. So I orbited for a couple more years before I ventured out. Thought, what the hell? Couldn't be any worse. How could it be worse than that? So.
Right. Are you in touch with, this is a part of a question that's on here. Are you in touch with other people who were in the Cadet Org with you at that time?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the best part. Honestly, I feel like that's the best part of circling back and reconnecting has been, I had some weird I don't know what provoked it, but I had this weird desire to find these kids that I grew up with. And I actually started in the mid 90s, frankly. So I hadn't been gone very long before I started reaching out to try and find these kids that I knew. And I spent some decades doing it. And that has been one of the most rewarding things that I've done. Aaron, you turned into a green icon. Maybe you're going to come back. There you are. Anyway, that's been really one of the most rewarding things that I have found is reconnecting with kids, and not just because I didn't go to high school or I didn't go to junior high. I didn't do any of those normal things. I didn't have a prom. We moved all over the place. I went to a bajillion schools through my life. I lived in a million different places. We were kind of like army brats following Scientology and trying to keep our overhead low to let my mom finance her OT levels. So I didn't have kids that I could, call up and say, oh, here's my childhood friend, apart from Scientology. So to me, these kids were a part of my puzzle, really, a part of my life, and we bonded. So I started looking for all these kids, but what I found later that I didn't know was how much we had in common in what we experienced in Scientology, whether it was the neglect or just bizarro situations that we were exposed to, just crazy stuff, or whether it was Sea Org or cadets. Nobody gets me like they do. There's just not any way anyone could that didn't live it. And so, and at that time, actually, you know how it is. You're not supposed to say anything negative. So you can't tell your friend that something bad is happening to you. You can't say anything. You're only supposed to speak to the ethics officer or your auditor. And so you internalize all of your struggle, basically, unless you're really brave and you speak out to your friends, which most people don't, because you'd end up in ethics or the RPF or whatever. So all of these disgusting things that were happening to us were actually happening to many of us, but we didn't talk about it and we didn't know. We thought it was just us. We were the bad sheep. We were the black sheep. We were the DB. We were the down. We didn't realize all these other kids were actually experiencing many of the same things because we weren't allowed to talk about it. So now we can talk about it, and it's been really remarkable and healing and sad. But it's really helped me come to terms with the fact that these aren't personality quirks of mine. We actually share them, and it's pretty textbook trauma, childhood trauma stuff. And that's a little disconcerting to read something, and it's like someone reading your diary, you know, or someone shares their story, and I can go, if you would change the name, that would be me. I experienced all those things. So there's a huge amount of peer support, and it's been extremely invaluable to me. I've really, really, really appreciated it, and I hope that it's resulted in some help for some other kids as well.
That's great. Who are some people, if you can say, that you're in touch with now who were in the Cadet Org with you back then?
Tom DeVocht was my CEO of the Cadet Org. Let's see. Who else would you know?
Well, I don't have to know them.
Yeah. Oh, I rattle them off.
No, that you're in touch with now?
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's a lot.
Oh, no, I've tracked down a shit ton of kids. I'm telling you.
And pretty much all of them out?
I'm persistent. No, a lot of them are not out, and that's really sad. So, but, and I was in touch with a lot of them. I collected kids, and I didn't care what their status was for years. I just brought them all to Facebook and created groups and stuff. And then over time, there's all this social media bullshit, disconnection crap, unfriending. And I tried to navigate that for a really long time and just be neutral. But there's certain people, Michelle Smith Workman, Marcus Carino, constantly going, hey, you know, Tom DeVocht, he's an attacker. You need to unfriend him. You need to tell all your friends or whatever, you know. So there was a lot of that going on that I tried to navigate. And finally, around the time of Aftermath, I just thought, you know what, anybody that's still kind of doing that, I'm going to take a break from them. I'm going to let them, they know where to find me if they want me. And I kind of cleaned house Facebook wise, but also to protect people that are under the radar that would be affected by me having an episode and speaking out. I unfriended those folks as well. So some I'm not in touch with any longer, but yeah, I found a crap ton of kids that I was in the Cadet Org with.
That's great. Scientology is such a small world. I think everybody in Scientology is connected by at most 2 degrees of separation, probably 1 degree of separation, but 2 at the max. That's one of the ways you know Scientology is as small as we know it to be. Everyone fucking knows each other. Like literally, it's crazy. I hope that becomes more evident to the world at large. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I think is misunderstood about Scientology, is that it's not as big as people think it is.
So the worst part about that to me is I can talk to people now and they have kids that joined the Sea Org, and it makes me just sick to my stomach. So there's third generation, there's kids that I came up with in the Cadet Org that got out and know better, but their children were drawn in because the whole family stayed in Scientology. And how are you going to argue with the recruiters? How are you going to defend against that? So that's the worst part for me in that small 2%, you know, 2 degrees of separation, is that next generation coming around and not making it out. It's pretty awful.
Right. Yeah. It is amazing to me how many of those kids that I knew in the Sea Org who were maybe 14, 15, 16 at that time, and it's like 20, 25 years later, and they're still there. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, some of these guys are like 35 and they're already like 25-year veterans in the Sea Org, you know? And on the one hand, it makes me get a little apathetic that, well, if you haven't left by now, you're never going to leave. But the truth is, there are so many other people who are in that category who have left. There's just no telling what it is that's going to push someone over the edge. That's usually what it takes.
Yeah, what's their breaking point? I don't know. That's the
Yeah.
thing. That's like, what would you say to somebody still in? I don't know. What's everyone has their own particular button. You know, often it's family. Maybe it's being given the discipline that you doled out but you never received. I don't know. I mean, it could be physical illness, mental illness. I don't know. It's different really for everyone. It's hard to know what the magic word is for or the password for anybody. But why do you think, like you said, what percentage would you say of people that you came up with are still in?
Half.
Wow.
I mean, to me, it's amazing to think that half have left. That's a lot. It's a lot of turnover.
I thought, I was so shocked to find out so many were still in. I thought everyone like me would have gotten the hell out of there. So as I found all these kids that I grew up with were still living in Clearwater, I was like, what? Who would still live in Clearwater?
You know what would be a great experiment that would be totally executable? To take like 20, 30 people, have them put together a comprehensive list of who was surrounding them 20 or 30 years ago. And then just go down that list. What percentage are out of Scientology? What percentage are still in? Oh. We could get 100 people to put lists like that together. Who do you remember was on staff at San Francisco Org when you were there? Good. Let's take that list. How many have left Scientology? If we had 100 people put together a list like that, and we went down the list, Scientology's not that big. That'd be a pretty good representative sample.
I agree. For me, the kids that have stayed in the Sea Org is pretty slim, actually. It's probably 10%. They all burned out of the Sea Org. There's a few that are still in, but there's a lot, at least half are still in Scientology.
Right. Oh, that's what I meant. When I said half, I meant actually left Scientology.
Whether they still believe or not is a different thing. And that one is a little hard for me. Like, I've navigated these friendships on Facebook, but we can't actually say, hey, do you still believe, or are you just under the radar, or whatever, you know, because you don't want to call them out. You don't want them to unfriend you. So that's a hard conversation to have unless you really don't care. If you lose them, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that a bit as well, where I've probably still got close to 1,000 Scientologists on my Facebook friends list. And, I don't just message them. I mean, I'd be like, why the fuck are you still on my friends list? Because in one respect, I want to be able to still have my fingers in that pie when it's convenient.
Right, exactly.
I feel like I'm doing their job for them. If I unfriend them, I feel like I'm doing their job for them.
I know. I kind of regret doing that, but
Yeah, no, but I mean, there's some people who've explained to me exactly why, for their own personal emotional reasons, they had to go through and be like, look, I can't live with this stress. I can't live with the potential of, should I or shouldn't I communicate with you? Are you spying on me, or are you not spying on me? And they just, just cleaned their lists of everyone they knew was a Scientologist. But, when someone sends me a friend request on Facebook, if they've ever been in Scientology, I usually have 50 to 100 friends in common with them still on Facebook.
For me, it was painful every time there was, it was unfriending based on status was like a disconnection. So every time it happened, it was another disconnection for me. And that was emotional to me. I didn't like it. It felt bad. It was yucky. So I chose to rip the Band-Aid off myself, I guess, to those people and just go, well, you know where I am. When you're out, you know where to find me. And it's, we're still friends, just not on Facebook.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
All right, let's see. What else do we got? Some of these just aren't actually questions. Well, on the printed out list that you have, is there anything there that we haven't addressed?
There's some really big ones. What wasn't covered in your story on Aftermath, that's so long, that's 20 years, and it would be really hard to talk about. I would say that my episode on Aftermath ended up kind of being children sacrificed to the Sea Org, which is true, but that's really doesn't cover a lot of what we experienced, specifically my mom, and all the ups and downs of that. But I think it touched on, but it didn't dig into, probably for legal reasons, our time on the RPF and what that was like. And that's something adults shouldn't have to experience, much less children, you know. That's some psychological abuse and physical, that no human shouldn't have to do that. I mean, really, as I've read now, prisoners in the US penal system have more rights and more privileges and more comfort than people on the RPF. So it's really, really wrong. And I hope that they did disband it and it doesn't exist again. But
oh, they did not disband it. That was bullshit.
I just can't believe they would take away a tool like that they used and abused and expanded to years and years, which it never was in the beginning. I can't imagine that they would just toss that. It just doesn't make any sense. That's not their style, number one. But the fact that they've eliminated children being born into the Sea Org or families being recruited that have young children does not mean that kids my age at that time, 12 and 13, are not being recruited and struggling and disappointed in what they find, because you're promised all of this wonderful scenario and that's not what you get. You get no sleep, and you get not enough food, and you get no time for family, and you get no education, and they get in there and struggle. They're hormonal and they're growing, and what's demanded of them is a lot more than you could ever imagine. So you know that 12 and 13-year-olds are still going to end up being rehabilitated. And so that hasn't changed. So kids, I promise you, are still being put through those same paces. There's nothing that's changed that. And so that's alarming to me.
Do you mean for the Sea Org?
Mm-hmm.
So currently, you have to be 16 years old with a GED to be allowed to join the Sea Org. Yeah.
Well, yay.
I mean, the church makes these changes not because they've come to their senses, but because they're trying to limit their legal liability.
Okay.
With all this exposure, they have no choice but to make certain changes like that. Okay. It used to be that they would let you get away with it at 14 if you were going into CMO, which I don't know legally why that was a thing. I don't quite get it. But but that is a thing these days.
Okay, so you're 16 and you're going to struggle and you're going to end up being rehabilitated. That's a difference. Okay, you're 4 years older. That's fantastic. I'm glad. But you're still a kid.
Oh, totally. No, totally. And what was the other thing I was going to say there? Oh my God, I lost it.
So my issue a little bit is I've on the internet just Googling around with children RPF, all this crap, because it's personal to me, come up with these different hits of people saying it's possible there were children assigned to this program as well. I mean, I think everyone knows that it's a really abusive, disgusting program, but I don't think they actually know that kids do it. I think it's a rumor. I think it's like maybe it happened. Maybe there was a sighting, like some kind of a Bigfoot, maybe children. And I don't think anyone gets that it's standard fucking practice.
Oh yeah, no one's exempt. If you're in the Sea Org, there's no exemptions for age for anything. So like one of my friends, Brendan Ty.
Not an anomaly. It literally was something that they were doing. And I'm trying to gather names for it because I think it should be gathered. And in 24 hours, I have 50 kids. God knows how many I'm going to come up with, over time.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Because you mentioned the RPF. Well, two things I want to say. One, children, minors being assigned to the RPF is, mark my words, going to be covered in season 3 of The Aftermath. There are some, in addition to the stories that you're talking about, just like your story, 12 years old, assigned to the RPF directly from the Cadet Org, and not some children's RPF, the RPF.
Thank you, because that's a big difference, number one. And everyone think children on the RPF went to the children's RPF. That's not
true. Now there was. I think I've heard someone talk about their experience on the RPF, and it was the children's RPF.
Right.
Which I don't know what that is because it didn't exist at Flag. If you were in the Sea, some cadet members, I guess, were assigned to basically the cadets version of the RPF, which is just something that someone made up. Yeah. It's not a real thing. It doesn't mean someone didn't really do it. I mean, within the structure of the organization, it's not a real thing. Someone had to just come up with some shitty thing to do to some kids. The real RPF is where you're doing years of 5 hours hard labor a day, 5 hours of enhancement a day, getting full false purpose rundown. Is that a timeout, Single?
That's a hell no. 5 hours of labor? 5 hours of labor? What the
hell? Oh. I mean, I don't know. I know that the policies are never what ends up really happening, but it's supposed to be 5 hours mess work, 5 hours enhancement.
Like for reading the FO. Okay.
No. I'm sure. Right. I'm just saying, even by normal standards, being like no education, 5 hours of Scientology study and auditing a day, 5 hours of hard labor. It's more like 10 hours of hard labor, no Scientology study. And I'm not talking about people who were just on it for a little while and then were reprieved. Reprieved is, oops, we were wrong, you're off. I'm talking about kids who went through the whole fucking program. The thing I wanted to mention about the RPF. So shortly after that bullshit article broke about the RPF being disbanded, some guys went to PAC, and if you know what you're looking for, you know you're looking at RPFers. Okay, so if you're walking down L. Ron Hubbard Way and there are Sea Org members doing any physical work of any kind, I don't care if it's gardening or sweeping the street, and they're wearing black shoes, black jeans, and a black t-shirt. It's usually an event t-shirt. It's usually like the birthday event or Auditors Day 2016. It's a black t-shirt. It's not a Sea Org uniform. If you're in the Sea Org and you're on a post, it is possible to have the post of gardener. It's just if you're doing that, you're wearing your Sea Org uniform for gardening. You're wearing Dockers, whatever, or Dickies pants. You're wearing a button-down, workman's type shirt. Right. It says your org on it. So if you're in black shoes, black jeans, a black t-shirt, and you're running from place to place, you're looking at an RPFer. People in the Sea Org don't wear that kind of clothes, and they don't run from place to place for no obvious reason. Okay, so I just want to say the RPF still exists. That was horseshit.
I agree.
And kids on the RPF, no question it's going to be on season 3 of The Aftermath. And I would love to see what kind of dickhead websites the church puts up on people who are talking about them spending years on the RPF as children. Can't wait to see what they decide to do to those guys.
Right. I was just talking about a kid PAC at age 10 or 12 and spent 10 years on the RPF because he didn't go to post and he went and played video games instead one day. I mean, just something insane like that. So yeah, I'm so thrilled. I hope they cover that. That would be amazing.
Yeah. All right. What else we got? Oh, I wanted to ask you a question about something. Mm-hmm. All right. How about we talk?
I was going to say, when we were in LA for that little reunion, a couple of us went to PAC base and were videoing the people around. And absolutely, exactly what you're saying. There was a group with a truck that were unloading boxes and had some type of event shirt on that was black and had black, bottoms, whatever they were. I don't know. I don't think they were jeans. I think they were some kind of black work pants or something. But definitely were running from building to building and unloading lots of some books or documents and stuff.
That's right. Did you go there with Tyler and Dylan? Were they with you?
Yeah.
Okay. It was when you guys went there and the stuff you posted on Facebook afterwards that I'm talking about.
It was so obvious. I mean, coming from all of us were on the RPF. I can tell you that we can spot an RPF from a mile away. There's no way. Yeah.
All right. So what do you think of all this Scientology TV stuff? How exciting is this?
I haven't watched it. but I've been reading all the reviews and they're just killing me. They just seem like comedy one-liners, these folks that are covered. I just love it. First, that they're so educated that they know exactly, and they're referring to Aftermath in dissecting exactly what they're covering. You know, they already know the backstory to all the PR bullshit. It's so wonderful. I'm gonna have to make myself watch some of the shit at some point. I just haven't done it, but I think it's as disgusting as it is to be driving to work and have some fucking commercial come on for Scientology TV. It just made me want to barf. I just think they're exposing themselves, and so okay. I mean, yay, go ahead.
Yeah. Chris Shelton put up a video about this, and I agreed with everything he said on this subject. So I'll say a couple things. I'm of the frame of mind that if you think someone's totally full of shit and they're a liar and they're a fraud, instead of trying to silence them and censor them and take away their platform, it's better to give them a fucking platform and show their bullshit to the world. That is exactly what Scientology has done. Exactly. They think they're accomplishing something, and all they're doing is contributing to their own demise. So I do get a little bit of enjoyment out of seeing what they've decided to send out as their message to the world. I cannot help but point out that anything they can air on channel 320 of DirecTV, they can put on YouTube. So they've spent tens of millions of dollars to accomplish nothing. All the videos that they're showing on this thing are the same videos that you can see if you walk into any Ideal Org these days and just tour through their video panel. And you know, them creating a DirecTV channel in the age when people are cutting the cord and getting rid of the satellite dishes like no one's business. I mean, it's like them still producing cassettes when people are buying iPods. Exactly. You know, I mean, it's such a joke that I'm almost glad. I'm like, good, spend your time and your money on this. Spend your time and your money on this, because you're not accomplishing anything. Who cares? Now, I mean, the late night comedians or the late night TV shows are having a blast with this. And it's so, you know,
they're doing our job for us, infiltrating and videoing their events and sneaking out these videos of their events. They're going to do it for us. So let them do the work. I think it's perfect, actually.
Right. And you just reminded me of my other thought about why I'm kind of glad that there's this TV channel. My goal in even talking about the subject of Scientology is more to create understanding than it is to create outrage. And the TV show, Scientology the Aftermath, has done a good job of creating some outrage, and rightly so. These stories are legitimate stories. They're not embellished. They're not anything, and these stories deserve outrage. But one of the ramifications of that is a lot of people going, I cannot understand how anyone fucking falls for this bullshit. And then I go, well, shit, if you don't understand, then there's still more to go. Like, if you don't understand, then you don't understand. The goal should be for you to understand. Okay. And the fact that this channel exists, I think is going to help people understand that even though it's easy to see these things and laugh at them now, it is also easy to see these things and understand how someone could be suckered in by them. They're very slick, you know, they're very well produced. You see a lot of young, happy, good-looking, successful, energetic people. That's attractive to a lot of people. Sure. There's a lot of people who might look at that and go, I would like that for myself. Now, because Scientology is a punchline and because Google exists, I don't think young people are going to see these things and just be running for their local church of Scientology. But I am hoping that a lot of people see these things and go, okay, I kind of get it. I kind of get how someone could see that and go, I'm interested in learning more. Right. Or at least go, I can understand how before Google was in everyone's pocket, someone would have been suckered in by this. Because for us, it's not that these videos got us into Scientology. It's that these videos are the kind of shit we would see at events.
Right.
at the international events, and they're very captivating. If you already believe in L. Ron Hubbard, and you already believe in David Miscavige, and you already believe in the state of full operating Thetan, you watch these videos and you're like, oh, we're taking over the world. And that is the effect the international events had on me, even as a Sea Org member. I never doubted anything I saw in those events. It's really embarrassing to look back on and see how much bullshit they would say at these events that I never doubted for a second. And so I guess part of me was like, okay, like you said, no one has to sneak this shit out of the events anymore because they're showing on TV the same stuff they would show people at events for the most part. For the most part, you know.
I feel like I don't look back and think, oh my God, I can't believe I believe that. I remember thinking at those events, God damn it, people actually think this shit. Fuck. That's what my thoughts were as a kid, you know, having to sit there and hip, 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 hip. I just thought, God damn it, this really works for people. Anyway.
I was like the opposite. I'd be sitting there in these events being like, thinking of all the people that I wish were here seeing this as well. They would finally get it. They would finally understand. Crazy, crazy shit.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Oh, someone said, what were you going to say about your friend Brendan? Hold on, there's someone that needs to be booted. The last time I booted someone is when the video froze, so I hope that doesn't happen. Oh yeah, my friend Brendan is one of the guys who was RPF'd as a minor. And one of his friends who also lives by me was RPF directly from the Cadet Org and spent so many years on the RPF that when he finally graduated and was given a real post in the Sea Org, it only took him a year or two to be like, fuck this, I'm out. The guy spent more years on the RPF than he spent in the Sea Org. Oh, when he finished the RPF, they made him do the EPF to actually be a real Sea Org member. So he spent more years on the RPF than he did in the Sea Org.
Yeah, because when you're on the RPF, or at least when I was on the RPF, we weren't learning how to be Sea Org members. It was really purely punitive and redemption. So it was, you know, work, 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 work. You're a fucking piece of shit all day long. And then, okay, now here's how you can redeem yourself. And it was sec checks and sexual stuff and, oh my God, reel-to-reel tape. You know, the read it, drill it, do it stuff so that you can audit. But the tapes you have to listen to that were like nap time for me because I was running on 2 hours of sleep a night. But you don't learn how to be a Sea Org member. You just learn how to be submissive, really, which isn't product zero, I guess.
Totally. I got to tell you, when I thought I understood what the RPF was when I was in Scientology and in the Sea Org. And what I didn't know is what the truth rundown was. And I don't know that I really want to take the whole time to describe it right here. I always say that right before I actually fully describe it. But when I actually learned what the truth rundown was, I was beside myself.
Well, is that the RPF? Is that part of the process now?
So yes, now it is the last thing you have to do. I'm pretty sure it's the last thing. This is where you take, they call through all of your folders, ethics, PC, staff, whatever. And essentially, and in the comments section here, if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me. They correct every critical thing you've ever fucking said about any Scientology exec or Sea Org exec or anything. Not just critical thing about like anyone, but about Sea Org members, Sea Org execs. Now, if this process was being done on just a public Scientologist, maybe it's being done on the important people in your life. But on the RPF, it's being done on Sea Org execs, L. Ron Hubbard, David Miscavige, your seniors, etc. And then you basically get sec checked on this in various ways until you realize you did not see or hear what you thought you said or heard. And that's why it's called the truth rundown, is you're supposed to realize that those things were not the truth. And I'm like, I have never heard a better description of fucking brainwashing in my life.
So what I that is that would literally, the cognitive dissonance of that, or the mental gymnastics you would have to do to that would cause severe psychosis. What I saw was not real. What I thought was not real. What I felt was not real. This is reality instead. That's some kind of schizophrenia. Intentional.
That's right. So it's not just that you're apologizing for writing a report. It's not just that you're, taking responsibility for your part of it. You're literally saying that didn't happen the way I recall it happening. And I've spoken about this with Chris Shelton, who did this on the RPF, and we spoke about it at length, which is why I'm pretty confident I'm describing it correctly. I've spoken about it with Nora, who also did this on the RPF. And I guess now you got me wondering when this was implemented as a part of the RPF. I have heard of public Scientologists doing the truth rundown. Oh, this is what Leah was put on at Flag after the whole Tom Cruise wedding incident. The truth rundown. She was supposed to come to the realization that these things she saw David Miscavige do, these things that she saw Tom and Katie do, didn't happen. That was supposed to be the end phenomena, the end product of this forced auditing and sec checking that she was getting, which just gets the pretty name Truth Rundown. That's what she spent $300,000 on.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And that's why I actually was so overwhelmed with sadness that the entire time I never understood that's what these RPFers were expected to do and what was required to finish the RPF. I always wondered why when someone finished the RPF, they didn't seem super happy and excited. This is going to sound really naive. I was like, okay, your average Sea Org member does not get to spend, years getting auditing and learning how to audit. You do that on the RPF. Your average Sea Org member does not get to do their OT levels. You oftentimes do your OT levels on the RPF. Mm. And from the frame of mind of a Sea Org member, yes, being on the RPF, you knew it sucked because you knew you didn't have any rights. You couldn't have a day off. You couldn't see your spouse. We knew it sucked. But from the frame of reference of a Sea Org member, there's only so much you can think it sucks if you're like, okay, well, yeah, you do mess work. You do physical labor 5 hours a day. A lot of Sea Org members would go, I wish I could do physical labor 5 hours a day instead of dealing with my asshole seniors all day long and these public who don't want to do Scientology. I wish I could go dig ditches for 5 hours a day. Some Sea Org members would feel that way.
Agreed.
Oh, you get to get auditing and audit people 5 hours a day. Well, me personally, I never enjoyed auditing or getting auditing, but there are Sea Org members who'd be like, I wish I could get auditing 5 hours a day. Okay. So as a Sea Org member, there's only so much fear one has about the RPF. Although Chris Shelton said he was always terrified of the idea of doing the RPF. So I'm speaking for myself. So I knew the RPF exists. I knew it sucked and it was something I was never going to do, but I didn't know that. I didn't know about the Truth Rundown. And if I did, and I think it's confidential. The Truth Rundown auditor course, okay, I throw that away. I might be full of shit on that. That would have changed something for me if
Really?
I had known that that's what it was and that's how it was being used. Because to me, I sometimes scoff when people refer to Scientology as brainwashing. I don't use the word brainwashing because it's too loaded of a word. I usually say conditioning, a way of thinking about something. That's straight up brainwashing.
That is. So the final step of the RPF is to completely compromise your integrity, period.
Oh, that's where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I always wondered why when people finished the RPF, they weren't like, hey, everyone, I'm back and I'm thrilled and I'm super competent and that was the best thing that ever happened to me and oh my God, I'm ready to kick ass. No, I was always wondered why they weren't like that. And I couldn't quite figure it out for myself. And I'm like, they always came off the RPF seeming damaged, seeming afraid, seeming hesitant. I'm thinking of so many examples in my head of just people who just, were so quick to, when they would get into trouble, become a blubbering mess.
Right. Yeah.
Because they never wanted to do that again.
Well, oh, of course. I think people that hit the RPF multiple times, I don't know what that would do to you, but you said you weren't particularly afraid of it because of and I knew other people that had extremely high demand posts that felt like the RPF was a vacation from those posts in the beginning. By the end, they didn't feel that way. Once they experienced all the abuse that went with it, but it's I guess being declared or being offloaded, really, because you would think of it in the Sea Org as the most extreme ethics gradient that you could possibly have within the Sea Org, the RPF, right? But really, while you're on the RPF, you're constantly being threatened with being offloaded or being declared. And so there's always something worse. And so I watched people every day begging to stay on the RPF, begging not to be sent to the curb because they'd been in for 30 years and they had nowhere to go. They didn't know anything else. They'd left their family and all their friends behind years ago, or there were kids like me. They didn't have anywhere to go. If they got offloaded from the RPF, they were homeless. Their parents weren't going to come with them. They didn't have anywhere else to go. And they had, they were kids. They had no education, no skills to transfer. So anyways, that was my experience of the RPF. It was the worst gradient within the Sea Org. But then once you're on the RPF, the gradients are worse. You have the RPF's RPF and you have being offloaded, which is end all be all, failure, complete rejection.
Right.
But we
were. So if someone's on the RPF and they're being threatened with being offloaded, you and I both know that many Sea Org members stay on the RPF because they would rather stay in the Sea Org than be kicked out of the Sea Org. But if one of those guys did say, okay, fine, I want to leave, what would happen?
In my time there, anyone that demanded to leave was put through this crazy mill of sec checks, red tape, RPF's RPF, watch, double watch, HCO bring order. I mean, you didn't get to just leave at that point. It took 4 months for me to leave once I demanded to leave.
But you're already being sec checked on the RPF. What the fuck do they sec check you about if you say you want to go?
I don't know, because I don't feel like I was being sec checked before I asked to leave.
Oh.
I attested to past life clear. All of a sudden, in the middle of whatever was going on, I was clear. And so that's what they were focusing on with me. And I was doing my read it, drill it, do it, and becoming an auditor. So the levels, I guess. But I hadn't even made it to the sec check part. And I was on for a year, but we were working so much that our redemption time kept getting canceled for months at a time. So we weren't doing all the great things you're talking about doing. I didn't get to go OT. I didn't get 5 hours of redemption time. At best, we had 3. Oftentimes, we had none. We were, for months on end, because we were so behind on the ballroom project, the FH renos, we were running on 2 hours of sleep a night, 4 hours of sleep a night, no hygiene time. We weren't even allowed to leave the ballroom. We slept on the floor by the wet bar. So we weren't doing sec checks. That would have been wonderful if we could have been doing sec checks.
That's a great point. It didn't even occur to me how long you can be on the RPF before you even get up to the point of doing the sec checking that you have to finish the RPF.
I had 3 twins. The first 2 were dudes in their 40s, and I was 15. And finally, they gave me a female who was 18, a little bit older. But I spent days and weeks doing OWs that ended up being sexual stuff that they had to get off. And it was really uncomfortable because I was 15 and they were in their 40s and they had sexual thoughts. And so it was just needle read. We couldn't even get through the beginning of the session and get on to what we were supposed to be auditing because there were so many 2D OW, withholds. I spent a shit ton of time just doing that before they finally assigned me to a female, which should have been all along. And I think that's actually kind of common.
Totally.
Yeah.
Sergio Gil had a similar experience where he was a minor and he was male. He was also gay, but somewhat completely in the closet. And then, you know, he's getting sec checked. Oh no, it was even worse. He was the one sec checking his twin. And his twin was this Hungarian dude named Tomas, who had been a flag ethics officer. And so Sergio, as a minor, is sitting here sec checking his twin, and his twin is fucking with Sergio by doing things like telling Sergio, like, okay, so his twin's getting off an overt, which for everyone watching is basically a sin, a transgression. But his overt is basically, you know, molesting or raping Sergio in their past lives. He goes by Serge now, but in the Sea Org he went by Sergio. And so that's a whole other kind of funky form of child abuse. Like the child, Sergio, he's in the position of having to be the counselor. He's basically being the therapist. And he's not allowed to react to what Tomas is saying. He's not allowed to invalidate him. He's not allowed to tell him to stop. He's not allowed to end the session. And Tomas can just sit there for as long as he wants, talking about all the sexual things he's imagining he did to Sergio in past lives. That's so cool. Knowing that Sergio's gay and that this is really pushing his buttons. Because I'm saying he's in the closet, but it was kind of a known secret thing. And
that's so gross.
60 Minutes didn't exactly include that in the fucking interview they published with Sergio.
Right.
They're such pussies. They don't want to include the fucking real shit.
Really gross. And that guy, you know, that guy, he's just, as I did anyway, they're pushing you to recall a past life or what is the reading, and you're just trying to invent stuff. Okay, well, I thought of this, so I'll say this. So he's coming up with disgusting sexual stuff to say about Sergio that he knows is bullshit.
And he's probably getting off on it himself, just saying it to Sergio.
That's what I'm saying, just to torment him and actually continue to be a pedophile. But so a similar thing happened to me. Those two guys, after we got through all the withholds about masturbation and sexual issues with other people, the last one and the hardest one was masturbating while fantasizing about me. And we were in the co-audit space. So it's a public space in the garage with benches and lockers, and you're surrounded by 20 other RPFers, and you have a co-audit soup. And so when this would happen, and these guys were turning purple in the face, not wanting to tell me this withhold that they had because everyone's listening, and the co-audit soup is behind me with their hand on my shoulder, prompting me to keep digging and keep digging and keep digging. And I can't describe that feeling to you, having to be a 15-year-old and be the counselor to a person that's telling you sexual stuff about you. I wanted to not exist, or I don't know how to describe how disgusting that was. It's really gross. And I know that's mild compared to what other people have had to endure. That.
No, I mean, that's not mild. That's as bad as it gets.
Well, I mean, let's say you're an auditor and you're 15 and it's what you do all the time. At least I only had to do it with 2 dudes for a couple of weeks. It wasn't my full-time job for years. So I'm saying it could be worse for sure. I know that.
It's okay. Yeah, you're right. Worse in terms of time spent, but that's, people, it's not just a matter of kids who happen to be in Scientology and then, get abused. This is Scientologists and staff and the Sea Org value children that become auditors. These people are looked up to. These people are considered past life Scientologists. Young people may not be allowed to join the Sea Org at 14 or 15, but they can train to become professional auditors at 12, 13, 14, 15. That's still okay.
Right.
There's no age restriction on doing auditor training.
Right.
And it is not possible to audit someone for any extended period of time without getting into sexual stuff.
Exactly.
Even if it's only in the rudiments portion of the auditing session, which is just a small amount of time spent in the beginning of an auditing session where you basically ask the person, anything bad you done recently?
Exactly.
And so there was this 15-year-old girl at Flag named Natalie Galbiati. She was a professional Sea Org member auditor in the HGC, and she was a good-looking girl. And people would pay preferential rates to be audited by her. You give me a reason why a grown-ass Scientologist is going to pay preferential rates to be audited by a 15-year-old girl. Give me a fucking reason why that makes any sense. And so then you have this girl who, as like you said, as her job, has to sit there. Sergio pointed a lot of this stuff out to me that I hadn't even thought about. So I'm going to say a few things here. You know what it's like to get ready for an auditing session. You sit down in your chair. The auditor asks you if you've got any tight clothes or shoes on. Oh, these pants are really tight. You unbutton your pants, you unzip them, loosen the belt. Oh, I'm real comfortable now. Okay. So now you're in the auditing room. Your pants are undone. The door's locked. These things, the craziness of this hadn't even dawned on me until like last year when me and Nora and Sergio got together out in LA and we were talking about this. And Sergio's running me through these bullet points of shit we never thought was crazy. And he was blowing my fucking mind. I was like, dude, this hasn't even crossed my mind.
It's so inappropriate.
Okay, so you're Natalie, you're a 15-year-old girl. Your job is to sit in locked hotel rooms with grown men, asking them about the most intimate details of their life. That's not fucking normal.
No, it's not.
And God, I wish I knew where Natalie was today. I wish I knew if she was still in the Sea Org or not. But like Natalie won awards for like Auditor of the Year. You know, she's brought up on stage. That's actually where I was going with all this. Young kids in Scientology are encouraged to do auditor training. And I think that's actually, that might have been the angle that 60 Minutes decided to go with on Serge's story when they ran it. Children becoming therapists. That would be a fantastic thing to cover in season 3 of The Aftermath, if you ask me. Because that's something that's still happening.
Yes.
It's still happening.
The expectation of Scientology adults that your children have OT powers and are, have the expectation of children in Scientology is that you are more than any other child, in history, and that you can recall these abilities from past lives, and that you can speed up, the OT levels, that you're past life clear, that you're all these things. That such high demand on kids, much less you're not given all the normal tools that you should have. You're not allowed to develop at the normal levels, not given all the things that you should have. The expectation on you is so much higher. But back to your point about kids being put in that position, I know that I've mentioned this to you before, and it's a sore point with me because I really, really experienced it and saw it nonstop my whole time in Scientology. Was the whole age is a consideration thing. It makes it so okay for kids to be preyed on by adults. And I'm not talking about in session. I'm talking about anytime, anywhere, whether you're in the Sea Org, not in the Sea Org. Once you remove the age barrier from a child, it's just fair game. So it happened to me specifically when I was developing physically. So probably 13, 14, all of a sudden, all these public Scientologists were asking me out, and really hard approaches. And it was really uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. It wasn't okay with me. It didn't feel right, but I saw it all around me. And what I was told was if I had a problem with it, then I had considerations and probably overts of my own on the 2D. And so it's such I don't even know how to explain that feeling when you're told that you, number one, don't feel safe, and you can't complain about advances from 40 and 50-year-old men. And if you do, and I know that my mother had issues with it because I watched her try to deal with advances on me. And she struggled with it. She didn't feel okay either about it, but she was trying to follow what LRH said. And so she would rationalize, and I could tell she was uncomfortable with it, but it's really, really prevalent. And I'm not saying that that's, you know, we get into this argument about what LRH meant and child and Dianetics, about the whole pedophilia thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about when you remove the boundary of age from children, they become fair game for a lot of things, labor, but also sexual advances. And it's not okay. It's so not okay. And I don't think that's really gotten, because that's going to cross public, Apple School, Delphi, any org, any staff member, any Sea Org member, period.
Sure. No, and I know for various reasons you've seen me push back on certain times this has come up. But if you've ever seen me push back on this, it's been situational and context related, because everything you've just described, there's no doubt that exists. What you've seen me push back on is there has been, and let's go over this real quick. Well, two things I'll say. In the Sea Org, there was a time when OSA sort of changed its rules on what they were going to do if a public Scientologist ever admitted in an auditing session to having had sex with a minor at any point in the past. And the main thing you've seen me push back on is two things. The idea that Scientologists in general think it is okay to sexually abuse kids. I didn't believe that when I was a Scientologist. I never. Now, again, here's the thing. Because when I say that, I realize I'm thinking one thing when I say that.
Okay, but
I'm not contradicting, but I'm not intending to contradict what you're saying.
What's the definition of sexually abuse?
Exactly. Okay. And that's where the conversation changes. I think there are people who have had the impression created in them that it is okay to molest kids in Scientology, meaning Scientologists think it's okay to molest kids in Scientology. Now, discussing the age of consent is a different thing. Like you said, I actually almost totally forgot something that happened in my family. My stepsister, when we all joined staff, I was like 12, 13. She was 2 years older than me. She was only 15 or 16 when the flag banking officer of the org, the FBO, he must have been in his late 20s, started going out with her. And her father had to be handled on why this was okay. Now, but I want to be as clear as possible. It's not that anyone at the org went to her father and said, it's not ethical for you to object to this. It was, so I don't want to see, that's where I'm making a distinction. It's not that the org pressured the father to let the 15-year-old daughter go out with the adult, but because, and I think this is your point, because Scientology has this policy and concept that kids are just Satans in small bodies, it creates an environment where it becomes okay to expect a minor to engage in a sexual relationship that they're not legally or emotionally able to consent to. Mm-hmm. And you'll never hear me make any argument against that. That is legitimately true. Because, but again, that's also different than pedophilia. Pedophilia is a very specific definition. It's a sexual attraction to prepubescent children. Mm-hmm. And although we all know and will acknowledge that the kids have been molested in Scientology, kids have been molested in the Sea Org. Mm-hmm. What I'm not prepared to agree to is that anything in Scientology makes Scientologists feel that it is okay to molest kids, or that pedophilia is okay. Now, again, to have this conversation honestly is like, okay, well then where do you draw the line? Like post-puberty, you've got what? 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Where do you draw the line? I'm not attempting to draw a line. Let's just say, you've seen me publicly push back on the concept that anyone in Scientology actually thinks pedophilia is okay. I'm not prepared to say that anyone I've ever known in Scientology thought pedophilia was okay. And one of the reasons that I am comfortable saying that is because the only way any of us ever knew that someone had fucking molested a kid or whatever is because they were in deep shit for it. And where you'll see me criticize the church and Scientology on that subject is that Scientology's policy of never reporting any Scientologists to the authorities for anything, that policy exists because the church cares about protecting itself more than it cares about protecting society.
Well, above the child, yeah, above the child, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Above and beyond, yeah, above the child, the church comes first. So of course,
that's right. The church cares more about protecting itself than it cares about protecting children or protecting society. And I will agree all day long that it is not good enough that the church thinks they can just handle it all internally. That's not good enough. I'm sorry. When it comes to child predators, they need to be reported to the authorities. That's what you'll hear me criticize. But so let me ask you this, though, your opinion. Do you think anything in Scientology or any Scientologists that you ever knew who weren't themselves pedophiles thought pedophilia was okay because of these policies that we're discussing?
Yes, I do. But these were the pedophiles themselves. Or I've heard excuses made from Scientologists that it was a past life relationship that was continuing to play out. So some rationalization of they pulled that in. They have a continuing relationship that's been weird for eons, and she probably abused him last lifetime, and so it makes sense that it's continuing to play out. So I have heard that type of a rationalization for it. But for
even with prepubescent children? Or are we just talking about children below the age of consent, but possibly past puberty? I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. I'm just making sure we're talking about the same thing.
So the times that we had the conversation, we were talking about teenagers. So I haven't heard that in defense of molesting a 5-year-old. No, I haven't. You're right.
Okay.
I have heard it that, and it doesn't make it, to me, it doesn't matter. That's not a explanation for anything.
No. But this is what happens in these conversations is that someone's trying to make a distinction for the purposes of being accurate, and someone else comes along and says that you're bad for wanting to make a distinction. I'm wanting to be.
No, I don't know. I don't think you're bad for making a distinction. I think, I had to clear the difference of what does pedophilia mean? What's the age? What's the cutoff? And there is a difference. There is a distinction. I don't think that Scientology is intending to breed pedophiles. I don't think that's true. I do think that they can read some things that are written and use it to rationalize and get away with what they're doing. And because of the church's practice of concealing and self-managing stuff to protect from PR flaps, it could create an environment where this could continue to happen longer than it would anywhere else. Yeah, I think that's true. And it's disgusting. But the age is a consideration thing as it affects you as you grow up.
No, it's true. I mean, there is no doubt about it. And again, it's amazing to me that there's some example like my stepsister. Like I literally hadn't even remembered that for a long time. There's no question. And Nora Ames has also mentioned examples of in the Sea Org where some like 15-year-old girl, I'm almost positive that was the age, 15 years old, is being pursued in a relationship by the security chief at Celebrity Center International, who was like at least 30, maybe 39, maybe even like older. And he was never told, hey, knock it off. That's not okay.
Why would you be?
Well, no, that's the point. Her point is that this is a real thing. This policy, right. It's not even that it's a policy. This is what just like LRH didn't have to put that in a policy for Scientologists to believe this. This is what Scientologists believe, regardless of whether Ella Ron Hubbard wrote this in a flag order or not. Right. Like all Scientologists will say children are thetans in small bodies. There are no such thing as young thetans.
Mhm.
Scientologists believe that Thetans are all trillions of years old. We're all created at the same time. You don't have different creation dates. We all have the same born on date. At
I'm
least I
wondering
think so.
that phrase, that phrase, age is only a consideration, came from. Because you've heard it, haven't you?
Oh,
I mean,
totally.
it was quoted to me over and over and over again, and I don't know where it came from. I just assumed it was written somewhere, but I didn't read any more than I had to read.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You're right. I can't remember exactly where it came from, but it's also one of these things that's used in recruit when someone's being recruited. And, the recruiters have their, go-to bullet points of things they'll use to change parents' minds about things. And this age is a consideration is just something that everyone in Scientology knows. That's a Scientology thing.
Right.
Time is a consideration. Age is a consideration. Money is a consideration. Everything's a consideration. Now, in the world of Scientology, consideration means a thought about something. It's an idea. It's just a concept. It's an abstract. Where the hell was I going with that? Well, so Nora was telling this story that, this 15-year-old girl eventually was sort of pursued until she could no longer say no. And, that's an example of something that would never fly in the real world. Well, that's not true. In Alabama, that would probably fly. Sorry, Alabama. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's a.
All right. So at first, when you were telling your story about being pursued by public Scientologists in San Francisco, in the back of my head, I was sitting there going, God damn, I'm surprised to hear that because I've never heard that before, but I know that sounds totally likely. And then I had to go, what the fuck am I talking about? Happened to my own stepsister. Like,
it was at Flag. It wasn't at San Francisco.
Oh, but you were a public or you were a Sea Org member?
Both.
Right. And so, I mean, yeah, it's the same thing. And I'm trying to think of other examples of public Scientologists like pursuing 14 and 15-year-olds. And you're totally right. If the person,
You're the one with the problem if you object. So
right.
parents.
Someone's asked me what I mean by prepubescent. Let's just, Jesus Christ, what do you mean what I mean by fucking pubescent? It's a fucking word.
So I watch some parents get creative with defending their kids, some public people, and make up excuses like, you're not up stat enough for my daughter. You're not moving up the bridge, fast enough for my daughter, whatever. But they couldn't say you're too old because then it was flipped on them as their own consideration, and they must have earlier similars or similars of their own or some type of OWs on their track about the 2D. So you would have to be creative with how you would protect your kids from these real adults. But
totally. For the record, the definition of pedophilia. This is Merriam-Webster.com. A sexual perversion in which children are the preferred sexual object, specifically a psychiatric disorder in which an adult has sexual fantasies about or engages in sexual acts with a prepubescent child. So if you want to know the definition of prepubescent, just look it up. I am not, and this is the danger in talking about this, and this is true for many things being discussed in society today. Trying to be accurate and specific is not apologizing or normalizing something. Okay? If someone wants to say that Scientologists think pedophilia is okay, I'm going to push back against that all day long. Because the only way I ever knew that someone ever did something like that is because they were in deep shit. You cannot reconcile that with Scientologists think it's okay. Now, but this is where the conversation gets a little more complicated. Because Scientology will not report pedophiles to the authorities, an argument can be made that, well, that means they think it's okay.
Well, they're enabling, obviously. Sorry.
Say it again. I didn't hear you.
They're enabling. They're condoning that. They're condoning it by not formally punishing. I mean, I know people that were offloaded. I didn't know at the time, but I know they were offloaded. I heard later what they had done.
That's right. And that's an interesting thing. So like they recognize it's wrong enough to like kick someone out of the Sea Org or maybe even declare someone, but they're not going to report them to the authorities. Now, I think there are probably people See, this gets into definitions of words, and it's almost a point where I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because I don't have a point to make on this. I feel that there is a difference. Okay, when Scientology is acting in its own best interests, which we agree is wrong, they believe. No, I stand corrected. I was about to say that if the Church of Scientology was trying to handle a pedophile the same way they try to fix gay people, you know, they think auditing. They do believe that your reactive mind is the source of everything that's wrong with you. Mm-hmm. They do believe that your evil purposes are the reason why someone would do something like molest a kid. Mm-hmm. So, from a Scientologist perspective, if they were trying to handle a pedophile by just auditing him for 1,000,000 hours, the argument could at least be made that they were being intellectually consistent, and they could at least say, well, we're trying to fix him. Right. But if Scientology just kicks someone out, but doesn't want to report him to the authorities because then that'll drag Scientology's name. Right. They can't make that intellectual argument. Right. They're literally just saying, we're not going to report this pedophile to the authorities because we're more concerned about our good name. Right. So
I think both happened. Do you remember that dude that was in the laundry room, the 3rd floor laundry room forever? He came off the ship and he was like remanded for his entire career to just be the laundry IC on the 3rd floor. Do you remember him? Giant, tall, gaunt.
Was this at PAC or Flag?
Flag.
The 3rd floor of what?
The FH.
So like I didn't get to Flag until 93.
Was the laundry room gone?
Yeah, the laundry in the FH was all auditing rooms by that time.
Okay. Anyway, this dude had been on the ship and then had come ashore to the Flag Land base, and his proclivity was young boys. And he was there as long as I was there, and he'd come from the ship. So they were trying to handle him, but they knew that he shouldn't be exposed to children and he shouldn't be exposed to the public. So they made him the full-time laundry dude that just did nothing but laundry.
Chuck Beatty is saying that was Bob Pryor. Does that sound familiar? So this guy was in the Sea Org, mm-hmm. and he was known to basically have molested young boys.
I don't know that he molested young Sea Org boys, but I know that he wanted to. That's all I know.
And they kept him in.
He might have gone off base and done it, and then was punished, disciplined, sent to ethics, RPF, whatever, sent to the X, and then back. So it was just this constant cycle of him being forever punished by being made to be this RPF IC, the laundry IC on the 3rd floor.
Yeah. So I want to kind of correct something, an impression I might have created here. When you have heard me in the past push back on this idea that we're discussing, that the Thetans in small bodies was responsible for X, Y, and Z. It has always been this concept. What I've been pushing back against was this concept that policy or that belief justified pedophilia. I've never intended to create the impression that I was poo-pooing the idea of young girls, much too young to consent to sex, that this policy does justify kind of pressuring young women like that into sexual relationships. Mm-hmm. Exactly like what you're talking about.
Right.
Exactly like what happened with my stepsister. And to me, those are two different conversations, and I'm not sure if everyone agrees that those are two different conversations, but to me they are.
I agree.
And so I want to correct the record if I've ever created the impression that I was poo-pooing the idea that things like what happened to you could be traced back to Scientology roots, because they absolutely can be, and I don't have it. You'll never hear me say otherwise.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think they are, or there's a dividing line, and I don't know where that is, other than the age. I mean, I would stick with prepubescent as prepubescent and pubescent as whatever. I think, but I don't know who makes that call, the person themselves. Is it okay if I hit on a 6-year-old, or is it okay if I hit on a 12-year-old? How do you decide when they're both ageless spirits in small bodies? I don't know.
No, it's a great fucking question from the, and when you say who makes that line, it would be, I mean, shit. I guess the question would be, who decides whether to send the person to ethics? You know what I mean? Like, okay, so my experience in the Sea Org was that there was a time, I mean, this was real. I was there. I was the tech sec. I was in charge of all the auditing that was happening at ASHO. And there came a time that when any public or Sea Org member mentioned in session ever having had sex with a minor, they were fucking routed out of the org. They were sec checked. All their auditing was immediately stopped. They were sec checked on the incident specifically until everyone was satisfied. Everything that there was to tell was told. And then they were fucking routed out of there. They're like, boom, you're gone. I don't even remember how they justified. They weren't declared. They were probably labeled PTS type criminal. I think it's B, but sometimes I forget which ones they are. They were considered a legal threat. You want to know why? Because there's no statute of limitations on that shit. And OSA, and again, these are rules OSA put in place, not because they became good people, but because they realized they had to protect the organization.
Right.
And they said, this person just admitted to sexually assaulting a minor. There's no statute of limitations on this. You're gone. They were still allowed to be a Scientologist. I don't even think they were allowed to do courses. They weren't allowed in the org. They were considered a security legal risk.
Love it.
And so now again, that doesn't mean, but here's the thing, the age of consent is different in different states. So that means what? Now the case supervisor and the ethics officer have to like read up on the consent laws? Like at some level, there is someone who is deciding what age is too young. And I don't know who's making that call.
So was this public only, or did it include Sea Org members? And when was this?
It included Sea Org members. This was around 2004, 2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know what age of consent is. Like you're saying, is it 16-ish?
It depends on the state. It depends on the state. And it depends on how old the other person is. Like in some states, like if let's, again, it's state by state, but there's some states where, for example, if you're 25 or under, you can get away with like 16 or 17. But if you're over 25, it's got to be over 18. Like some states have it tiered like that. And I saw a police officer friend of mine explain, because actually there was a Facebook post where someone that I didn't know, but it's someone my police officer friend knows, was arrested recently for having sex with a minor. And this went up in a Facebook group, and there was some police officers chiming in, and he was explaining some of the laws about it. And that's where I came to understand not only is it different from state to state, but it's age bracketed as well.
Right. That's so interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So, but that means someone in OSA, that's what it comes down to here, Christy. It's going to be someone in OSA decides where the line is. That gets sent out to all of the senior case supervisors of all the orgs, who then are now responsible for holding that line in their org, right? I'm
glad. Whatever caused it, I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, though. That just means if someone happens to mention it in an auditing session. But you know the best way Scientologists get around getting off overts. It's not an overt to me.
Exactly. That was such a good lesson for me to learn. Oh, I have to get that off if I just don't consider it an overt. Perfect. Oh, I love that. On that subject, though, while we're at it, there were a couple of girls, 2 girls that were teenagers. I'm going to say they were 15 and 16 at the time, that were raped in Clearwater because they were out after curfew hitchhiking. And they were local kids. They weren't in the Sea Org at the time. That came back to the org. And of course, you pulled it in, sent to ethics, blah, blah, blah. And were very highly pressured not to report it to the police because it would have been a PR flap that they were out after curfew unsupervised. And it was a big deal. One of them really wanted to report it and the other one didn't. She was ashamed. And then when I was on the RPF the second time, my roommate, who was not an RPF, we had to share a room at the Heart of Clearwater at the time with some non-RPF. And she came in and was all disheveled and had twigs in her hair and abrasions and stuff. And we were queued up to use the shower. And we're not supposed to speak to her, obviously, but she's shoving her way into the bathroom because she has to shower immediately. She has to get this dirt off. And we talked to her anyways and broke the rules. and turned out that she had been raped while she was jogging near the heart of Clearwater. And she was so terrified of getting hauled into ethics and sec checked and having her leave of absence canceled that she refused to let us call security and make any kind of report, and threatened us. And of course, threatening an RPFer, we knew we would, if she wrote us up, we'd end up on the RPF's RPF, so we couldn't say anything. But those were just really peculiar situations that happened while I was there in regard to rape that was really self-censored by the second girl and stifled by the MAA because of PR reasons the other time.
It is unbelievable to me that an organization could act that way. And when I say that, I don't mean I don't believe it. I mean, God damn, the idea that anybody would be more concerned with, they're going to ask why this person was out unsupervised than they are with reporting a fucking rape is just so unfucking believable.
Yeah. And none of it was being raped by a Scientologist or a Sea Org member. They were out in the world and it happened. So it wasn't as if a Scientologist was responsible. It was just that it would reflect poorly on Scientology.
Totally.
So interesting.
And maybe this is another sign of things changing or whatever, but one of the local downtown Clearwater business owners who's not a Scientologist, he's a guy, he's probably 60-ish, thereabouts. He owns a local pizza place, and he has been accused of rape by a local Scientology girl who, I'm not sure if she's under 18. I want to say she's 19. I don't remember where I got that specific age from, but I remember thinking she wasn't too young to consent, but she was too young to drink. And if I have the information correct, it was on July 4th. After July 4th, the allegation is that she was drinking at his restaurant, and he basically got her drunk and then went back to his place. And I cannot swear that I know whether the accusation is that it was rape because she was drunk, or if it was what we generally consider rape to be, like, but it's an example of a Scientologist who is definitely too young to drink, accusing a local non-Scientologist of rape.
Interesting.
Despite, I don't know, is there blowback? But again, do you know what makes this different? This is not the church changing anything. She's a legal adult. You're talking about a case where someone's a minor, right? Those girls you're talking about were minors, and they were out unsupervised, and that's what the church was trying to protect. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Totally. So
this is a totally different situation because we're talking about an adult. And yes, she was too young to drink, but she's also an adult. And so the church didn't have a responsibility to keep her from drinking. Whereas in your example, the church had a responsibility for those kids to be supervised.
So in my estimation, in that situation, she would just be sent to ethics. They wouldn't help her pursue any charges or tell her that she should. She would just be figuring out how she pulled it in, right? And
totally.
ATS handling. There would be no action against the dude because
that's right. They would not be pushing her to press charges. It would be her call.
Unless there's some other agenda afoot that we don't know about.
Right, because he happens to be a non-Scientologist business owner right in the heart of downtown Clearwater, where the church would like them all to be Scientology-owned businesses.
Then that makes perfect sense.
Right. And crazy shit. I hope I can get Sergio to do an interview on this subject as well.
Please do.
Because in his case, you not only have the fact that he's a minor, but you have the fact that he's, struggling with at that time and being ridiculed and invalidated for being gay. And so not only is he struggling with being a minor, being put in these situations, but he's struggling with being told he's a bad person for being gay, and there's something wrong with him for that reason as well. And
add to that, though, his job prior, it's just so disgusting what he was required to do, the pressure put upon him, how he was used as a tool, such a precise tool, and then put through exactly what you're talking about, then subjected to that as well.
Yeah, it would be great to see Sergio on season 3 as well. Season 3 could really kick some serious ass.
Why don't you do it? Do it. Do it.
Do what?
Sergio.
Oh, interview him? Oh, I can't get him on season 3. That's not up to me. But I can twist his arm until he agrees to do an interview. I mean, he's got nothing. I mean, 60 Minutes already blew their opportunity to cover the important part of that story. So
he was actually rattling off to me the other day a huge list of child RPFers when he was there. I mean, it was unbelievable. And the reasons were equally unbelievable. It was so disgusting. We have to put that list together and do something with it. It's so gross. It's really super disgusting.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't blame him if at some point he just wants to move on, but I think he would probably still want to. Do you think he'd rather move on?
No, I think he's conflicted like the rest of us. Do we stop giving up years of our lives to Scientology and just move on? But you're conflicted. How do you do that if you know that something you could share could make a difference for future kids or current kids or adults or whatever, whoever? Something has to be done and people have to stand up. And so, but it's conflicting. I totally get if he wants to move on.
Totally.
You want to be happy. He's given enough to Scientology already, but sometimes you have to give a little bit more, and it's hard. That's all.
True.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that we should cover, or have we're good? What do you think?
I think we've covered a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we could always do more, that's for sure. You see, I've already done like 7 or 8 hours with Nathan Rich, and we're about to do another one tomorrow.
It's so good. I love those. They're so good. Got so much to say and share, and so do you. I really appreciate all of your interviews.
Well, thank you. Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, how about this? Anyone who has stuck with us for 2.5 hours, post your questions. We'll consolidate it, Christy. Instead of putting it all over Facebook, we'll say, if you have follow-up questions based on what we've discussed, post them in the comments below, and then we'll take them up in the next video.
Okay. Sounds good.
Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging in with us, and see you guys soon.
Bye.